Hey guys, welcome back. This is a story about what if Naruto befriended Kurama early. After a life-changing event, Naruto meets Kurama early and they become partners and even good friends. With a better outlook on life, he meets many who want to join him and help achieve their dreams and goals together. Among those friends are many beautiful women. Realize just how important he is to them. Before we start, thank you for all of the support. It really means a lot to me. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and leave a like. You can suggest a Naruto fanfiction with a link in the comments if you want me to read it, and check the description for the creator of this great fanfic and support them for making this fanfic. So let's start. Not much to say here. I thought the chapter was mostly alright the way it is, so I just improved grammar, spelling, and flow. I think the next few chapters will be like this and should go by relatively fast. Hope you'll enjoy. Late edition. Welps, there I go again, suddenly thinking up a scene after I've already done the revision. Some of the reviewers have been kinda complaining about there not being enough Temari in this story so far, and I agree with that. I just couldn't think of a good spot to put another scene with her somewhere, until now. You won't have to look far to find it. In fact, it's right after the chapter title. Closing parenthesis dot. Please let me know if you like it or not. I'm not sure I did a great job, so if you have any suggestion, let me know. I might go back and revise the scene a bit more, but it seemed okay to me for now. I guess. Warning. This story will contain mature language, sexual themes, and graphic depictions of violence and gore. Disclaimer. I do not own Naruto or any of its characters. Chapter 18. A Summer of Changes. Suna, Lady Temari. The aforementioned woman groaned inwardly as a somewhat confident and admittedly handsome young man walked up to her with a charming smile in the middle of the mission assignment room. She knew the song and dance already as she turned to face him with an annoyed expression. She had just dropped off her stamped mission scroll and just wanted to get home. She had no time to waste shooting down another unworthy male. A few minutes later, she was stalking away from a stunned and emasculated man. Most onlookers would have called her rejection harsh and unreasonable, since the man looked handsome and had a nice style. He was certainly brave enough if he was willing to ask the beautiful Kunoichi out despite her connection to her powerful father and brother. However, he already failed to impress her the moment he willingly called her by her formal title. She knew right away that he only saw her as the daughter of the village's leader, not as herself. Considering she spent most of her life training to be the best Kunoichi possible, she never made time to decide on what traits she wanted in a potential suitor. However, she at least knew one thing her ideal man at least must have. She remembered how a certain blonde boy treated her like a normal person. Even though he knew she was the daughter of a powerful Kage, it never changed his opinion of her, and, for a few hours, she felt like a normal girl with no worries, having forgotten about a psycho brother almost killing her or dealing with her estranged father. She wanted to feel like that with the man she loved, if she ever found him. She highly doubted this, Mr. Right, resided in Suna at all. In fact, she was more inclined to lean toward Konoha as a possible location. She shook that train of thought off before it got into dangerous territory, though she couldn't fight down a small blush as she remembered a certain pair of blue eyes flashing with merriment and mischievousness. Sighing inwardly, she made to walk out of the Kage tower to head home when a pair of voices stopped her by the exit. I hear something interesting happened in Konoha. That was enough to draw her attention to the side toward a Chunin leaning against a front desk with another Chunin sitting behind it. Oh yeah, something definitely happened. You get any detail? The receptionist behind the desk replied. Nah. Why do you think I came here? You're great with picking up rumors. Alright. It's not for sure, but I heard that a giant toad crashed into the middle of the village. Whoa. You mean one of those summoned toads? The ones bigger than even this building. Yeah. It was even wearing a haori like a Yazuka boss. I don't care about that. Why'd it crash there? Was it fighting or something? No, I heard it was transporting some injured people in its mouth. Apparently it landed by the village's hospital. Think one of them was Jiraiya of the Sanin. He was the only one who could summon those big toads. Would hate to meet the bastards that could manage to hurt him. That, I know what happened. My friend knew a friend whose cousin worked in, yeah. Get on with it. You and your damn friends. Alright. Apparently Jiraiya wasn't hurt at all, he was unconscious from extreme chakra exhaustion. Still would hate to meet the bastards that could manage to make him use up his chakra. True dat. Anything else? There was someone with him who apparently looked like he went through hell and back 10 times in a row. A teenage boy. Probably not even a genin yet. He had blonde hair and blue EY. A feminine hand shot out for the receptionist's collar, and yanked him harshly across the desk. Before he knew it, he was staring into a pair of frightfully desperate teal eyes. That teenage boy, what was his name? Do you know? Temari hissed dangerously with narrowed eyes, further terrifying the man into almost pissing himself. The other Chunin was already backing off quite far away, not wanting to be caught in this woman's ire. You. Spit it out. Uzumaki. That made Temari still as her eyes shrank in shock. The receptionist just remained stock still, not daring to breathe even as this terrifying woman seemed to stare out into space for what seemed like an eternity. What happened? She finally asked softly, surprising the man. Daring to glance up at her face, he was shocked to find her looking so vulnerable. Ever since he first laid eyes on her, he had never seen her like this. She was always guarded and intimidating, at least until now. This Uzumaki, please tell me what happened to him. She repeated, even more softer, as she released her hold on his collar. The receptionist nodded slowly as he slid back into his chair. He's all right. He was badly hurt, and I heard he actually almost died, but he made it. I hear he'll be waking up any minute today. I don't know any more than that for now, though. There was very palpable relief from her upon hearing that. Thank you. And I'm sorry for manhandling you like that. I just had to hear this. She spoke, relief and happiness permeating her every word. It's all right. I can understand. Are you really sure about your rumors though? They sounded very credible and specific. Temari queried with curiosity. To tell you the truth, my medic girlfriend is doing an exchange program with Konoha's hospital. Temari beamed. So, all that bullshit you just spewed about your friends is just me putting on a show for my captive audience. She laughed warmly. I like that. Thanks again for telling me about Uzumaki. I'll be coming by once in a while to see if you hear more about him, if you don't mind. I'd be happy to keep an ear out for you, Temari-san. Nodding, she turned with a wave over her shoulder as she practically skipped out the exit, obviously happy with the news that this Uzumaki survived. The receptionist watched her go, feeling like he had seen a side of her only seen by a rare few. And he had a good feeling this Uzumaki Naruto was one of them already. He smiled, thinking that young man was going to be the luckiest bastard in the world for getting to see this bright and happy side of the untouchable rose of the desert, often in the future. A moment later, the receptionist glimpsed the downtrodden form of the man who had tried asking Temari out earlier, shuffling toward the exit, looking dead to the world. He then rose out of the seat to break the bad news. Oh, he would leave out the location and name, but the fact that someone from outside the village already had the beautiful Temari's heart would remain, and this charmer had no chance from the start anyway. He smirked evilly as he didn't mind rubbing salt in the wounds. This guy was a huge asshole. Meanwhile, inside a certain person's dream, in the reality known as Uzumaki Naruto's mindscape, the large world had been divided into large portions over the years of training the blonde had with Kurama. In addition to enjoying the environment-specific recreational activates and the beautiful views, the portions were set up to aid in Naruto's training as he adapted to battles and tactics in deserts, mountains, forests, seas, caverns, and many other locales. Right now, Naruto found himself in the most recent developed portion he had created with the help of Kurama. It was a large city, which was hobbled together in parts from the powerful entity's memories, that was specifically designed to train Naruto in urban battles and stealth. Kurama warned against using a familiar setting like Konoha since he would have already known how to move around in that locale. He needed to be more experienced with an unfamiliar urban setting. He absent-mindedly admired the brilliance of Kurama's training regime as his back crashed against the side of a building when he was sent flying backward by a thrust kick. He then barely moved his head out the way of a small but very deadly open palm as Kurama's blow slipped past and struck the concrete wall behind him. The entire wall exploded inward violently, taking out 3 more load-bearing walls in its path. This caused the 5-story building to tilt and crumble loudly into large pieces over Kurama and Naruto still battling at its base. Naruto frowned as he considered if he needed to scramble out of the collapsing building's path. That was for naught as he watched Kurama calmly shift her left arm across her body before swiping it through the empty air underneath the falling debris about to crush them. The entire building stood no chance against her immense power as most of it were instantly vaporized by nothing but pure chakra that emitted from that wave of her arm. The few remaining large pieces that survived flew through the air like missiles from the force, punching holes through many surrounding buildings. She did all of this with a calm and smug smirk as she stared at a gulping Naruto with her beautiful golden eyes. Shit. Why did I think I could fight her off long enough? The blonde muttered incredulously as he took in the suddenly devastated city around them. The small dark-skinned woman didn't give him much time to reflect on his recent mistakes as she dashed toward him with insane speed. It took the blonde all he had to just react instinctively with a right counter punch aimed for Kurama's head as she was dashing in. Of course it was the wrong move to make as usual for him when she easily slipped past the fist and grabbed hold of the arm before spinning around to swing him around like a ragdoll. She then released to send him flying through a nearby store's front window with a loud crash. Everything fell silent as Kurama swatted a loose strand of her hair that got free from its messy bun over her shoulder and struck a bored pose standing in the middle of the street, waiting for Naruto to do something. Come on, that shouldn't have put you down for long. She muttered impatiently, and got her response in the next instant when she heard a familiar whirring sound. The entire storefront then exploded outward, momentarily obscuring her vision with the resulting dust cloud. Kurama smirked widely as she prepared a defensive stance and watched her container jump out of the dust cloud with a bright blue spiraling sphere of densely compressed chakra in his right hand and a menacing snarl on his face that would have frightened anyone except for the one in front of him. Rasengan. Outside Naruto's hospital room, how much longer is this gonna take? It's been an hour and a half since they kicked us out. Ino grumbled impatiently as she slouched down on the hallway bench next to Hinata, who was sitting properly in comparison. However, her expression was slowly becoming impatient as she stared across the hallway at the door to Naruto's hospital room. Not much we can do if there's possibly any sensitive information involved. Enko spoke up from her spot leaning against the wall across the hall from the younger girls. Next to her was the cat-masked Anbu Yugao standing guard at the door. She, too, wished to know what was going on in the room but there wasn't much she could do until the Hokage finished his business. It's a good thing I decided to wait on getting the boys when I ran into you guys in the lobby. They would have gone crazy from waiting here so long. Ino muttered with a bored expression. Any particular reason why you two girls are rather anxious to see Gaki again? Enko queried with a smirk. Reading their expressions, she knew something happened between those girls and Naruto earlier in the day. Ino and Hinata snapped their heads to her in surprise before their cheeks turned red. Ino squeaked out before her gaze shifted to her lap with her blush intensifying. Anyo, WW or not, Hinata didn't do any better. Enko chuckled while Yugao's shoulders shook silently as she kept her laughter in. Before Enko could tease the younger girls further, the door slid open suddenly, making all four women jump to attention. They watched the Hokage's head poke through the door with a frown on his face. I'm not sure what to say here. Perhaps you all should come in and see for yourself. You know Naruto-kun well and I may need your insight. He spoke in an unsure tone before making room for the confused women to step in through the doorway. They saw Jiraiya sitting up in his bed and he was staring at an unconscious Naruto with a frown. What's wrong here? Hinata queried as she watched the sleeping Naruto lying still in his bed. She noticed the blonde was frowning intensely. He's been unconscious for the last 30 minutes and we were waiting on him to wake up to get the official answer to an offer sensei made. We think he answered too hastily the first time without any consideration for his tenant's opinion. She was apparently angry enough to forcefully drag him into the mindscape for a face-to-face chat. Just as the Jiraiya finished explaining, all the four women flinched when Naruto's body jerked slightly as if he was hit by an invisible force. That has been happening for the past 10 minutes. I think the confrontation between him and the Kyuubi is getting worse. We have tried to wake him but it's no use. We were wondering if any of you knew a trick to bring him out of the mindscape. The Hokage explained. Naruto jerked again at that moment, making all four women frown. I do not know of any method that could bring Naruto-kun out of his mindscape, even though I have watched him mediate several times. Hinata said sadly as she stepped up to Naruto's bedside and took hold of his left hand. Enko frowned in deep thought, apparently at a loss too. Hokage-sama, I feel the best option here is to go into his mindscape ourselves and stop whatever is going on in there. Ino spoke up a little nervously, since she was in the presence of the village's leader. The third turned to her with a raised eyebrow. That's right, your clan specializes in mind jutsu. However, would it be safe, Ino-san? Naruto-kun may be friends with the Kyuubi, but there's no telling how she would react to someone else's presence in the mindscape. He pointed out. Ino frowned as she thought over this. I'm not sure, but Daddy can answer that question. I haven't learned the necessary jutsu yet anyway. She offered. The Hokage nodded and turned to Yugao. Neko-san, please summon. I'm sorry to interrupt, Hokage-sama, but there's no need for that. I can get him here in almost an instant. Ino cut in politely while showing a small mischievous grin. The third raised an eyebrow but nodded, interested in what this young woman intended to do. Everyone in the room, except for the unconscious Naruto, watched in fascination as Ino silently walked up to the large rectangular window next to Jiraiya's bed. She slid one end of it open wide enough to admit a person and began to inhale. Everyone braced for what they thought would be a loud yell. Daddykins. Ino called out sweetly in a voice only slightly louder than normal. Everyone face faulted at this unexpected action and Ino turned around to find everyone staring at her incredulously. What? She muttered with a confused frown and a casual shrug. Anyo, perhaps that wasn't loud enough, Ino-chan. Hinata ventured cautiously. Enko and Jiraiya were doing their best to not laugh uproariously at this absurdity. The Hokage just remained silent with a gentle smile, thinking it was just young people playing games on an old man. I'm not that inconsiderate of the patients here, Hinata-chan. This is a hospital, so I have to keep my voice low. Don't worry, Daddy definitely heard me. Ino assured. Isn't your father off today and at home on the other side of the village? Yugao offered cautiously. Ino nodded and cocked her head cutely. I know, but he's on his way here. Everyone stared at her, not quite sure what to say. Hokage cleared his throat and was about to suggest that he would send Yugao ahead to meet her father halfway, to let this young woman down easy. However, all the non-believers nearly jumped out of their skins when an arm shot into view and reached over the windowsill with a loud slap. They then watched in amazement when a panting blonde man with a long ponytail appeared into view as he pulled himself over the sill and climbed into the room on wobbly legs. He bent over to catch his breath. You called, my little princess. I'm sorry, I took so long. Yamanaka Inoichi finally wheezed out. He did just run, at top speed, all the way here from his home at the flower shop after all. Hokage-sama here has some questions to ask you, Daddy. Ino explained as she politely presented the third with a hand gesture. Inoichi's eyes widened as he took in the room's occupants. They were staring at the two Yamanakas in shock until the Hokage cleared his throat a few seconds later. Yes, I was hoping you might be able to help us solve a small issue, Inoichi-san. Due to a disagreement, it seems the Kyuubi has forcefully pulled Naruto-kun into his mindscape 30 minutes ago for a confrontation. Right now, it apparently is getting violent. Naruto's body jerked again just as the Hokage finished his explanation, and Inoichi frowned. I suggested that going into Naruto-kun's mindscape would be the best way to deal with this as soon as possible. Ino supplied, and her father nodded. It is, and I can dive in to see what can be done in stopping what's going on. There's no danger as long as I'm alert and ready to leave any moment. Would it be possible to take me along? I'd like to see this for myself. The Hokage spoke up. Inoichi nodded and they shifted into action and moved over to Naruto's bedside. Anyo, I would like to come along if possible. Naruto-kun will most likely listen to me. Hinata spoke up shyly, but with a determined expression. The Hokage thought briefly about refusing, but he then realized this young girl would have known the best ways to calm Naruto down, so he nodded his approval. I'd like to go with you as well, Hokage-sama. Ino chimed in. Inoichi didn't seem to like that, though. Are you sure, princess? I don't think. He trailed off and gulped when Ino displayed her powerful puppy eyes with an adorable pout. Isn't this safe as long as my smart and manly daddy's around to take us out if anything happens? She sweetly spoke. Yes, princess. Daddy will keep you all safe. Inoichi declared as he puffed out his chest. She's totally got him wrapped around her finger. The others thought with sweet drops as they watched this display. Meanwhile, Enko grinned inwardly as she wondered if she might have discovered someone with a natural talent for manipulation, perfect for the T&I department. Anyone else? The Hokage offered with a weary sigh. Enko smirked and shrugged. Just 2 of his favorite girls should be more than enough to handle Gaki. She joked, making the younger girls blush. In just a moment, the Hokage and the younger girls surrounded Inoichi at Naruto's bedside as they maintained physical contact with him. We're going in, the Yamanaka clan head announced as he rested a palm on the unconscious blonde's forehead. They all closed their eyes. So how long will this take, Daddy? Ino impatiently asked with her eyes still squeezed shut. We're already here. Inoichi replied with clear amusement in his voice. Everyone else blinked their eyes open to find themselves standing in the middle of a beautiful tree-covered mountainous terrain. Whoa, Ino breathed out in awe as she took in a gorgeous high cliff with a tall and misty waterfall roaring away in front of them. Hinata was speechless as she slowly spun in her spot to take in the surrounding hilly terrain covered everywhere with lush green vegetation. From what Naruto explained about his mindscape training, she knew that he was able to create something like this, but to see this for herself was a very different experience. This is amazing. This kind of detailing shows how incredible Naruto-san's mental capabilities are. He must have spent years in here improving and tweaking all of this. Inoichi observed in awe as he stared around with wide eyes. The Hokage was also impressed by what he saw, but he sensed something coming here at a high speed. Before he could warn the others, a blonde blur zipped by overhead blowing their hair and clothes around with the heavy gust it generated in passing. It then crashed loudly into the cliff face at a steep angle and skimmed across it through the waterfall before boring into the rock on the other side, creating a long scar across the rock wall. Naruto-kun. Hinata and Ino cried out. They would recognize that particular blonde color anywhere. It's all right, girls. After observing this mindscape, he clearly has the mental capacity to fortify himself to superhuman levels here. Things like that won't hurt him too much. Inoichi assured. Would that help against something as powerful as the Kyuubi? The Hokage nervously muttered as he felt the familiar sensation slowly press down on them from behind. Is this what the Kyuubi's power feel like? Ino whispered shakily as she felt the strong presence for the first time in her life. Yes, Ino-chan, but it's strange. If I would have to describe this feeling, it's less raw and more civilized, compared to before. I also figured we'd be hearing heavy footsteps and loud roaring if she and Naruto-kun were fighting. Inoichi replied with a puzzled expression before he turned, prepared to face the giant demon fox for the first time since that night. And his jaw promptly dropped in shock. The Hokage copied Inoichi's expression gobsmacked when he turned around as well. The 2 bemused girls looked where the stunned men were staring at, and were surprised to see a beautiful and petite dark-skinned woman in a skin-tight singlet, instead of a giant red-furred demon fox with 9 long tails. They found her golden eyes very striking even with her menacing scowl. She was walking briskly toward where Naruto ended up, and didn't seem to have noticed the new arrivals yet since all of her attention was apparently focused on the blonde. The new arrivals stood still in shock as they watched this woman, who was somehow emitting the Kyuubi's powerful presence, walk past them in silent annoyance. Oi! Get out here so I can wipe the floor with you some more. You haven't gotten enough punishment for being a stubborn asshole, the woman called out as she arrived at the base of the cliff, baring her small fangs as she flexed both her clawed hands. In the next moment, the hole in the cliff face exploded outward into a large cloud of dust. A large piece of rock shot out of the dust at Kurama, who swatted it aside as if it was an annoying fly, before Naruto then followed it out toward the woman with his clawed hands outstretched in a loud snarl. Kurama smirked confidently just as he reached his right arm back for a swipe, and she easily slipped underneath it and reached up to grab the blonde's extended arm by the wrist. She spun around and used his momentum to flip him over onto his back on the ground hard enough to crater it several feet deep. He grunted in pain before his head suddenly sank farther into the ground under Kurama's powerful foot stomp. Still keeping a grip on his wrist, she then flipped across Naruto's body while dragging the dazed blonde up off the ground with her. She then smoothly turned and tugged him hard toward her, right into her waiting free hand that grasped around his neck. Due to the forced momentum, he was then clotheslined hard up into the air before Kurama drove his head down into the ground with a loud crash. Hinata and Ino covered their mouths in shock at such a violent display, while Inoichi and the Hokage were getting a bit nervous watching this. How were they supposed to stop that powerful woman? Kurama was preparing to cause more damage with another foot stomp, but Naruto still had enough presence of mind to kick up out at her head, catching her on the mouth. That knocked her aside, making her lose her grip on him. She stumbled back while wiping a hand across her lips, before grinning ferally, making all four spectators shiver. That expression proved to them, with no doubt, that this was the Kyuubi that somehow changed into a human form. Good. You finally got a real hit in against me. Let's see you keep that up. She praised as she settled into a stance, her golden eyes flashing dangerously. A panting Naruto slowly got to his feet. Damn it. You're not even letting me use your chakra. It's all I can do to just stay on my feet against you. He grumbled as he straightened out his body and shifted into a stance as well. The woman frowned. I'm not concerned at all about what you think is fair. My only objective is to have you accept the offer. I'll use all my options and available tools to achieve it, such as blocking your access. It's a basic shinobi rule your godfather, Anko, and I beat into your head over the years. A rule that you're clearly ignoring at this critical moment. She growled out the last sentence before dashing in. Grimacing, Naruto steadied himself to absorb a powerful right hook across his face from Kurama that made the land around them tremble from the concussive force. However, he was ready for that as he stepped in close and smashed an instantly formed Rasengan deep into the woman's stomach. It was enough to grind into her for a few seconds before exploding with such force strong enough to make her bend over for an instant. She grimaced in slight discomfort before smirking as she readied her left fist to bury it in Naruto's stomach with a loud impact as her response. Despite the obvious grimace of pain on his face, it didn't make him back down. They then descended into a powerful slugging fest that shook the land with each concussive impact, and they struck everywhere they could reach on the other's body. It was clear Naruto was going to lose the exchange eventually, despite his valiant effort. Kurama was still looking almost pristine, even after taking the Rasengan and many blows, compared to Naruto's increasingly bruised and bloodied state. Meanwhile, all four spectators were silently watching with increasing apprehension. Finally, Hinata couldn't take it anymore after watching the two combatants slide backward a few meters apart from each other due to a powerful exchange of right hooks to their faces. They perked up their heads to glare at each other before they stepped toward each other, ready to begin the slugging fest anew with their left fists raised and poised. I've seen enough. Ino-chan, please stop this with that, she ordered of her friend, who flinched in surprise at her friend's outburst and commanding tone. Oh okay, she sputtered out almost in fear before she took a large intake of breath and stuck a pinky finger each into the corners of her mouth. She then blasted a loud high-pitched whistle that made Inoichi and Hiruzen wince. However, her whistle did the job when Naruto and Kurama, who were about to resume hitting each other, immediately yelped loudly in pain before falling to the ground trembling as they covered their ears tightly. Due to their sensitive hearing, Ino's uniquely high-pitched whistle was extremely destabilizing for them. That sounded familiar, Naruto murmured in confusion after he took a long moment to recover while Kurama shook the daze out of her head. Both their heads simultaneously shot up with irritated expressions, ready to yell. Oi! Who the hell did that? Their anger changed instantly to surprise as they were stunned into silence at the sight that greeted them. A silent Hyuga Hinata was standing in front of them with her fists on her hips and her patented glare was on full display. It was more intimidating than anything else those two had seen before. Sit, now, she ordered firmly in a quiet voice, adding to the intimidation of her glare bearing down on them. The combatants gulped at the same time and instinctively sat in Caesar like scolded children in front of the intimidating-looking girl. Hinata expelled a calming sigh before she fixed the combatants with a piercing look. Have you two been fighting all this time? She spoke neutrally. Kurama and Naruto nodded hesitantly. Have you two actually tried to discuss whatever issue caused this disagreement? She continued. The scolded party silently shook their head with visible guilt. Kyuubi-san, it is, Hinata calmly began before stopping as she noticed Kurama raising a hand. Kurama is my true name. She cut in quietly. The indigo-haired girl's glare softened and nodded her understanding with a small smile. Naruto glanced over at Kurama with some surprise, he hadn't thought she would have revealed her name to others easily. Kurama-san, it is apparent that you did not agree with Naruto-kun's decision, whatever it was. Why didn't you try to talk it out with him instead of forcefully dragging him here to beat him into submission? He has always told me you're surprisingly level-headed despite the sources of your power. Hinata pointed out and Kurama frowned. He decided my opinion for me as if he was certain that was what I would have wanted. I told him otherwise, but he wouldn't listen so I, got angry. She mumbled out the last words. Hinata nodded and directed her firm gaze at Naruto who flinched nervously. Naruto-kun, I love you, but your stubbornness can be irritating sometimes. This isn't the first time you've done this. You've decided things for me several times in the past when I actually felt otherwise. She spoke with an understanding look toward Kurama, making Naruto bow his head in shame as she continued. From now on, you are going to need to consider other people's opinions more and actually listen to them before making any decision. Kurama-san here might have been considering what's best for you on this issue. But, it would remind her of something bad that's happened in the past. Why would she accept any of this? I would have been happy to agree with her 100% on this one and refuse the offer. Naruto debated with a confused frown. However, before this would continue, the Hokage stepped up next to Hinata and laid a hand on her shoulder to stop the conversation. As much as I would be happy to watch you two discuss this calmly and hopefully come to the desired answer, I'm afraid I can't allow the young women and Inoichi-san to hear the rest of this. It's a S-rank secret, should the answer turn out negative. He spoke firmly, not allowing any leeway. I was hoping to find out what was causing this latest drama. Ino pouted, her inner gossip denied. Inoichi slowly shook his head exasperatingly behind her. Everyone. What are you doing here with Hinata-chan? Naruto queried with a puzzled frown. Kurama sighed wearily and reached over from her Seiza position to smack him upside his head, making him flinch. Idiot. They came in here because we were fighting and they got worried. She grumbled. Your body was flinching all the time as if you were being hit, Naruto-kun. Ino chimed in, her expression a little distressed at the memory. Naruto and Kurama sighed at the same time and bowed their head. Or sorry for worrying you. They spoke sincerely. Hinata and Ino nodded their acceptance. The Hokage smiled amusedly at the situation as he honestly didn't expect the quiet and gentle Hinata to have taken charge of the situation, despite the fact Kurama could have easily destroyed her for doing something like this. I wonder if the disaster on Naruto-kun's birth could have turned out differently had you been in your human form back then, Kyuubi-san. Or is it alright for me to call you Kurama-san? He spoke kindly. Kurama shrugged with a casual grin. Kurama is fine as long as only Naruto's friends know. Dismissing the fact that I was controlled by the masked bastard that night, you would have still feared me even in this form, old monkey. Why would we? You're gorgeous. If anything, you would have had men, and some women, falling over themselves at your feet. Ino blurted out in confusion. Kurama blushed slightly at the compliment before sighing. It's not my looks, but what you're feeling right now. Your power. Even though I'm now seeing you as a human woman, I can't help but still feel very nervous around you. You're powerful enough to kill all of us in an instant if you wanted to, Kurama-san. Inoichi pointed out. Hinata gulped inwardly when she finally realized now she had just scolded the most powerful entity in the world, and lived. Correct. I'm actually repressing my presence as much as I can right now. It's impossible for me to hide my power from any of you chakra-sensitive humans unless if I'm behind a seal like Naruto's. Unless they know me personally, most humans will continue to feel threatened by my very presence. Kurama replied and things then fell silent as the four new arrivals considered what she said. Naruto decided to break the ice. I don't think you'd have liked to deal with her as a human, Hokage Gigi. This tiny terror has been kicking my ass all over the mindscape until you guys showed up. I actually think she'd have done more damage to the village the way she is now. He said with a chuckle while Kurama frowned. You've been questioning my gender while I was in fox form. Now that I decided to grace your undeserving vision with this beautiful form earlier today, I thought that would finally stop. However, you're going to start piling on the short jokes now. She grumbled. You're the one who decided to make yourself that small, shrimp. Naruto shot back with a smirk. Kurama jumped to her feet. Oi. You'd better take that back. You should be grateful to me for even bothering to help make you taller. Otherwise, you would have been stuck as a 4 feet tall prawn for the rest of your life thanks to that disgusting slop you keep insisting on eating all the time. Naruto jumped to his feet as well and got into Kurama's face. Don't you dare insult the food of the gods, he growled. The petite woman was about to retort when the both of them flinched violently at the sound of Hinata clearing her throat forcefully. They immediately snapped back to their seiza positions with their heads bowed guiltily under the Hyuga Hire's renewed glare. However, Hinata had intended to get only Naruto's attention, so she wondered why Kurama was responding to her as well. Was taking command of the situation so rare for her? It was a big shock even for the great Kyuubi as well. Naruto-kun, please discuss this calmly, as well as any other issue that may come up in the future. If your body flinches even just a bit now or any other time, I will come back in here to check on your progress. Would you like that? She spoke firmly. Naruto quickly shook his head with sweat going down his forehead, while Kurama snickered quietly. Ino whistled quietly, impressed with Hinata's ability to take control of the usually stubborn blonde once in a while. The Hokage and Inoichi were doing their best to hold in their snickers, knowing exactly what it was like to be whipped by women. Only a couple hours with Naruto-kun as your boyfriend and you're already having to scold him twice. Ino whispered with a smirk as she leaned in next to a weary-looking Hinata, who sighed. I know. Hopefully I won't be alone in that regard for long, Ino-chan. She whispered her friend's name pointedly, making Ino blush. A few minutes later, Kurama and Naruto waved as the 4 guests flickered out of existence to leave the mindscape. The blonde sighed as he lazily dropped down to sit on the ground cross-legged and silently watched some of the injuries from earlier disappear from his body. Sorry I ran you ragged. Kurama offered from next to him with an amused smile. He shook his head and chuckled. No big deal. At least I know ass kicking can come in small packages. He retorted with a grin. Kurama's eyebrows twitched as she reached down and smacked him upside his head again, making him grin. She sighed wearily and moved behind him to kneel and lean against him, making him blush a little when he felt a soft pair of breasts pressing against his back. She then draped her arms lazily over his shoulders as she nuzzled her nose into the nape of his neck. As unusual, and somewhat scary, as it was for her to take control, Hinata's right. We should have talked this out instead of me dragging you in here and opening a can of whoop-ass on you. She spoke softly next to his right ear. You made it sound like it was totally one-sided. Naruto muttered grouchily. Kurama smirked as she pinched his right cheek as if he was an adorable child. Ah, where in your delusions did you think it wasn't? She mocked. The blonde grumbled as he lightly swatted the hand away. You're surprisingly touchy-feely in this form. He observed as the woman wrapped her arms around his neck again and nuzzled her nose into it deeper. Not that he was complaining. I'm actually pretty cuddly with someone who's trustworthy and very warm, like you. Thanks to my fox form, it's been ages since I ever got to do this to anyone. I probably will spend at least a few years catching up on my hugs. You'll have to put up with this till then, Naruto. She whispered as she hugged tightly and pressed her body even more into his back. A blushing Naruto cleared his throat. It doesn't bother me. Do however much you want to your heart's content. He said sincerely. Kurama smiled into his neck. It's a good thing Hinata is very accepting, otherwise you may have regretted those words later on. What do you mean? You may find out someday. She whispered mysteriously into the blonde's ear. He frowned for a moment before deciding to put it aside for now. He knew better than to try to drag anything out of women if they were being vague about it. Alright, fine. Let's move on. Why do you want me to have the Sharingan? I thought I was doing you a favor when I turned it down, considering your past experiences being put under control with those eyes. Naruto began. Kurama sighed as she relaxed herself on his back. You may be right that I don't care much for the Sharingan. However, it just merely reminds me of the ones who used its power on me, the Uchihas. They were the ones who used the Dujutsu's abilities to control me because they wanted more power. It's them I hate, not their eyes. Kurama explained as Naruto nodded sadly in understanding. By itself, the Sharingan is a powerful tool if used effectively by the right person. I honestly believe you will use it well and you won't rely on it too much, like so many Uchihas. That's why I was confident in letting you take this. Besides, I can actually see chakra pathways, detect and break genjutsu, and predict my enemy's attacks to a degree with my own eyes. The differences between the Sharingan and the I would have regrown for you are the ability to copy jutsu and the extra powers a Mangekyo Sharingan may offer. If these are the only differences, you might as well take the Sharingan anyway. She encouraged. Naruto sighed and had to admit she made some good points, but he was still unsure. I think I would rather be happy with the eye you're offering, though. Who needs to instantly copy jutsu anywhere I go? I'd rather have something of yours. He murmured in a weak attempt to make his case. Kurama smiled brightly and squeezed tightly around him to show her appreciation. Thank you, but I wouldn't blame you for choosing the Sharingan after hearing this. Your eye is just about gone with only some tissues and frayed nerves left. It would have taken hours to regenerate it, so that's why I didn't try to restore your eye along with your other injuries on the operating table. With full regeneration of something as complex as an eyeball, I would have to push all of my power into just this socket, she spoke as she pointed casually at Naruto's closed left eye. To get any form of healing going, I will also have to infuse a little bit of my essence in order to reform the eyeball in my own image. I know all of this because I actually did this as a favor for my first container one time in return for allowing me some more freedom in her seal. A surprised Naruto looked over his shoulder at Kurama, who nodded seriously. Uzumaki Mito once lost her right eye to a pinpoint Senbon strike in an attempted ambush, and I spent 6 hours regenerating a new one for her. It was a long and exhausting process for us both that could not be stopped, even for breaks, until the new eye was completed. It also was very painful for her the entire time because I was constantly pushing my chakra at its densest throughout her socket. It actually made the first Hokage break down crying like a baby many times at seeing his wife in so much pain. She said somberly, while the blonde's mouth suddenly became dry at the image she was painting. The end result was a silted crimson eye that worked better than the old model Evercut, but it stood out too much. She ended up having to use a special genjutsu on the new eye so it'd look the same as the other one until her death. I don't think anyone other than Hashirama, Tobirama, Senju Tsunade, and Kushina knew about this. She finished and smirked when she heard Naruto gulp nervously at what was involved in regenerating a new eye. She sympathetically patted on the blonde's shoulder before displaying her outstretched left hand in front of him, drawing his attention. A holographic projection of a Sharingan eyeball popped into existence above it. On the other hand, we have an available and ready-made eyeball that's just a bit more powerful than what I'm offering. Best of all, they'll implant it in 30 minutes or less, and I'll finish the job by adapting it to your own system the best I can. It'll be almost painless in comparison. I've also had around 100 years, since I helped Mito, to understand everything about how a human body works from inside here. Not to mention the fact you've given me the most freedom in here out of all my 3 containers and, who knows, it might not even look like a normal Sharingan when I'm done with it. She whispered almost seductively into his ear as the display changed to an image of a DNA strand. Naruto was silent for a moment as he stared at the spinning display before showing a nervous smile. Now that you've explained all of this, I think I might just go with the Sharingan on this one. No offense, Kurama. He muttered with a sweat drop. Kurama grinned as she closed her hand into a loose fist, making the display disappear. None taken. It'll just mean very little work for me. They both chuckled for a moment before she sighed. Sorry I went off on you. It would have made more sense to chat over this instead of fighting. She said sincerely. Naruto nodded with a small smile. I didn't listen and just decided something for you. I didn't realize I was doing that, so I'm sorry too. I did need some sense beaten into me. He finally said as he looked down guiltily. Kurama nodded as she gently pushed off him to stand. That's okay. I knew you were worried about my feelings, even though it was rather irritating. However, people have to do something they may not like to get the best end results once in a while. You will face that kind of choice many times in your life. All I ask is to carefully consider the benefits to you and how everyone would feel before deciding. I suppose that makes sense. Hell, I'm taking the Sharingan even though I'm still not wild about it. Naruto grumbled. Kurama smirked down at him. There's another reason why you don't want this aside from how I feel about the Uchihas, isn't there? Nothing important. It's silly. You forget, I can read your mind. she reminded, before she burst out laughing as she hugged her stomach tightly as if to hold her sides in. Alright, fine. I didn't want to risk somehow becoming an insufferable asshole like that Sasuke Tem. Naruto grumbled as he crossed his arms and pouted childishly. Ha ha ha. There's no way that would ever happen. On your worst day, you're 100 times the man he will ever be. The others would laugh at such a ridiculous idea too. Kurama laughed as she slapped on his back this time. Just when he thought she was done, the black-haired woman suddenly collapsed to the ground howling with more laughter. What the hell is it this time? Naruto demanded with a scowl. IJJ just imagined why you with the DD duck ass hair. Oh, I see can't be breathe, she finally got out through her laughter. After a moment, she stopped instantly at the sight of an evil smirk growing slowly on Naruto's face. Oi, what are you thinking? That's your pranking face, she muttered. Oh, just thought of something I'll use outside. Why don't you read it from my mind like usual, he said casually. Kurama smirked before shaking her head no, her golden eyes flashing mischievously. I enjoy your pranks more when I don't know what you're planning, she admitted. Soon outside Naruto's single eye fluttered open and he felt a hand in his right. He smiled as he gave it a squeeze, and Hinata jumped at the sudden sensation. Naruto-kun, you're back with us, she exclaimed happily as she squeezed back. Everyone in the room snapped their attention to Naruto's bed. He didn't see Inoichi, so he apparently had left the room for other business. Sorry I took a while. Kurama and I had things to discuss. Kurama. Jiraiya cut in with clear interest in his voice. Enko and Yugao looked curious as well. Oh, sorry. That's the Kyuubi's real name. Naruto clarified as he frowned inwardly. Damn it, that's something else I decided for you, didn't I? I just assumed you wanted your privacy and I avoided telling everyone your name for years without even asking you first. He thought sadly. No harm done in this case. So the beautiful little Spitfire has an actual name too. Enko spoke up with a knowing smirk. Naruto sighed and turned to a suddenly bashful Ino with a deadpan expression. You told everyone, he accused, making her shrug and stick her tongue out cutely. That you were getting your ass kicked by a woman smaller than you. Yes she did. Enko shot back as she broke out chuckling. Yugao's shoulders shaking as she fought to keep in her laughter added to Naruto's mental blow. Tell me, did you pick that size because everyone would mock your opponents when you wipe the floor with them? Only Kurama's snickering answered his inquiry and he sighed. He decided to just ignore the teasing and addressed the Hokage. Hokage Gigi, how long before they would say I'm fully recovered from my injuries other than the eye? I would say another day just to be sure. The Hokage replied, wondering what he was getting at. Naruto nodded as he looked deep in thought for a moment before fixing the old man with a serious gaze. You can tell them to prepare for tomorrow. Kurama recommended that I'm at 100% before we do anything. He said simply, confusing everyone around him except Jiraiya and the Hokage. You mean you've decided? The third inquired with rising eyebrows and Naruto nodded. I'll take your offer. I've thought over this some more and I feel I was too hasty in declining the first time. In addition to the obvious benefits, if I'm the only one around who you think should take this, then we can't risk leaving something this powerful lying around long enough for it to fall into wrong hands. He spoke with full resolve, much to the Hokage's growing happiness. Jiraiya smirked. Gaki, if that doesn't prove how responsible you will be with this, I don't know what will. He chimed in. What the hell are you talking about? Enko demanded, asking what was on everyone else's mind. Naruto looked over at the Hokage for permission, but he shook his head. Not for now. At least wait until tomorrow when it's already done to avoid any information leaking out beforehand. We shouldn't risk even a tiny chance of someone disrupting this. Naruto turned back to his friends with an apologetic shrug. Sorry, but you heard our great and wise leader. You'll know tomorrow. He said much to everyone's disappointment. Please rest assured. This will be a very positive turn of events for Naruto-kun after all he had gone through. The Hokage assured with a smile, which helped relax the women. Tomorrow afternoon in a secure operating room, so, this is the Sharingan. A fully recovered Naruto casually remarked as he stared at an eyeball floating inside a small liquid-filled container in his hands. He frowned when he looked closer with his working eye. I'm pretty sure there are supposed to be at least a tomo or something in the iris. All I'm seeing is a four-pointed shuriken, or a pinwheel, whatever this is. That would be Shisui-san's personal iris signature denoting a Mangekyo Sharingan. This is an upgraded version that's said to provide unique techniques that even most of the Uchihas only dreamed of. The Hokage chimed in from next to him. Oh, I heard Kurama mention the term in passing. I didn't think much of it at that time, but you're saying this is even stronger. Naruto muttered with a frown. This is how Shisui-san and Danzo controlled people with this Sharingan. It is a rare power offered only with the Mangekyo version. I don't mind the other benefits, but I don't like that power. What if I used it on someone and I didn't even know? Naruto replied with some worry in his tone. The third smiled as he laid a hand on the blonde's shoulder for reassurance. This is still a tool that has to obey the user's wishes. I think as long as you do not desire that power, that particular technique won't manifest itself even accidentally. He assured. Someday, I'll show you my memory of Hashirama's battle with me and Madara. As much as I hate that Uchiha bastard, he's crafty with his Sharingan's techniques and used them in combination with me to push Hashirama to the brink. I can easily imagine how effective they would be in combination with your transformation if we were successful in learning even just one of the techniques used in that battle. Kurama chimed in. Wow, that'd be awesome to watch. Oh, you just reminded me. Hokage Gigi, I talked this over with Kurama last night and I felt I needed to tell you this. Naruto began as he turned to his surrogate grandfather. What would that be, Naruto-kun? She told me that she has the ability to alter the DNA of a foreign entity within my body and assimilate it to cooperate fully with the rest of my system. That means this eyeball will most likely be permanently altered. She's pretty confident the powers will remain, but it might look very different. Would you be willing to allow that with something as prized as this Sharingan? He explained. The Hokage smiled and nodded. That would be excellent. The lower the possibility of anyone identifying this eye as Shisui-san's, the better it would be for your welfare. Even if it's implanted in you, it will not stop your enemies from attempting to kill or disable you to try to steal it. On that note, I expect you to forget that this eye belonged to Shisui-san from this moment onward for your own safety. No one else can know, even your friends, Naruto-kun. He advised firmly. Naruto nodded his understanding with a serious expression. He looked back down at the container in his hands. Oh. This mysteriously popped into my hands just when I needed a new eye. I don't know where it came from or whose it was, but I sure don't mind taking it for myself. He said with a mischievous grin as he carefully set the container on a nearby stainless steel table. The Hokage nodded with a grin of his own. Very good. Now, I believe it's time to get underway. Since this is highly classified, there's only one who I trust that has enough medical training to perform the transplant. I believe you know this person. He said as he waved his hand at a dark corner of the operating room. An Anbu covered from top to bottom in a heavy white cloak, with a horned dragon mask peeking out from under the hood, faded into existence out of the shadows. Naruto raised an eyebrow. The only Anbu I could never manage to prank. Of course I'd know Commander Dragon. He said with a grin as he inclined his head toward the Anbu, who shrugged. It certainly wasn't for lack of effort, Uzumaki-san. I'm going to prepare for the operation. Dragon retorted in a distorted voice as she removed her cloak to reveal a distinctively female body underneath. Even clad in the loose Anbu outfit, Naruto was able to easily make out the tone and curves of her slender legs and wide hips. In addition to her horned white dragon mask, she had her entire head encased in a shinobi balaclava, hiding even her hair from view. He was a little disappointed to see how much the chest armor concealed the curves of her breasts. He was a little curious about their shape and size, after all. You're not shy this time, not even bothering with a genjutsu. He observed. The cloak would get in the way while I'm performing the transplant, and I have no reason to hide my gender around you, considering what happened the last time we met. Dragon grumbled, and the third chuckled and shook his head at the reminder. Naruto blushed and did his sheepish pose. I said I was sorry. It was such a huge shock to me that I just blurted it out. He defended. At least it probably saved you when it surprised me so much I forgot about stabbing you at that moment. Dragon conceded. Naruto's face suddenly changed to an inquisitive fox-like expression. Yeah, about that. Do the recruiters focus on finding people with a tendency for stabbing everything that moved with pointy things? Because that's what I'm getting from most of the Anbu I dealt with. They suddenly developed the tendency soon after a little blonde terror came into the picture. Dragon shot back without missing a beat. Touché. On the other hand, with your constant infiltration of the headquarters and pranking my subordinates all the time, you probably helped shape us into the most alert and secure special ops force in the nations. The Anbu admitted begrudgingly. See. I knew my pranking did some good. Naruto exclaimed, pointedly ignoring the deadpan stare from the Hokage, and he had a feeling Dragon was wearing the same expression under her mask too. He then walked over to the operating table and climbed onto it. Alright, let's get that little sucker in me. He declared as he removed the bandages around his head to reveal his useless eye socket, then laid on his back. Dragon took a moment to scrub up before moving to stand over Naruto. He noticed a little hesitance from her as he felt her stare at his wound. Everything all right, Dragon-san? He inquired with some concern. The female Anbu shook her head. It's fine. Just realized that blonde little terror grew into this young man before me. She said softly before she retrieved a syringe from a nearby tray. Naruto raised a hand to stop her. You might as well save that for someone who'd need it more than I do. I become immune quickly to any poison or drug and I'm not wild about the idea of waking up to you digging around in my eye socket. He said with a mirthless grin. Dragon sighed and shook her head as she put the syringe back. You've already impressed plenty of people, including me. You don't need to do it again now. She muttered with a light tone as she retrieved the Sharingan in its container. It's not like I like pain. Naruto countered grouchily as he opened his left eyelid as best as he could. Dragon moved in to begin cleaning the wound of any possible infection and leftover tissues. 15 minutes later, I've established the minimum connections, so your tenant will need to do the rest. I'm very impressed that you didn't make a single sound, Uzumaki-san. Dragon remarked as she stepped back and deactivated her mystical palms jutsu, having just finished implanting the Sharingan. Naruto slowly pushed himself up to sit on the edge of the operating table, his left eyelid now closed. He grinned sardonically. Doesn't mean I didn't feel it. I doubt anything will ever hurt as much as the agony I was in after that avalanche, though. He chuckled before continuing. Thanks for your help. Kurama will take over now. Just as he said that, a tendril of red chakra formed out of his left shoulder and moved to engulf the left eye socket. He grunted loudly in pain and resisted the urge to slap a hand over his eye with every bit of his effort. Kurama apparently began her work right away and she wasn't gentle about it either. Oh, this is going to be so much easier than I thought. This Sharingan's DNA isn't very different from yours for some reason. This won't take long. Fuck. This seriously hurts. You're saying Mito Bachan dealt with this for 6 hours? No, it was much worse for her. It'd probably be about half as long for you if you had insisted on having your eye regrown. I did have 100 years to understand the inner workings of a human's body. However, it'll still be just as painful for you as it was for her. Kurama spoke neutrally as she continued her work. Naruto felt the new eyeball shape itself slightly in his socket until it began to feel like it was meant to fit him all his life. He also noticed its vision being restored slowly as well. Someday, I will convey to you how grateful I am for convincing me to take the Sharingan instead of the other much more painful option. I'll hold you to that, Naruto. For now, we're just about done. The pain faded at that point and Naruto let out a sigh of relief. That must have been something for you to actually make any sound. Dragon commented from next to the Hokage as she put her cloak back on. I don't think I can accurately describe this kind of pain. It actually felt like a part of my body was dying and renewing repeatedly at the microscopic level. Anyway, it's ready. Naruto announced as he looked at the two before him, his left eye still closed. Let's see it then. The Hokage encouraged with a smile. Slowly, Naruto opened his left eye. He winced as the room's lighting overwhelmed his new eye for a moment before it adjusted. He slowly took in the operating room around him, awed at seeing the small details his right eye wouldn't have picked up at all. Like how he noticed a tiny chip in the lip of a stainless steel bowl nearby, a small spider crawling around in the far upper corner of the room, and the person in the X-ray picture hanging all the way across the room had a barely noticeable hairline crack in one of the upper vertebrae. He turned his gaze on the Hokage and saw an immediate difference. Whoa, I think I'm seeing your chakra flowing through your body, Hokage Jiji. It looks mostly brown with some bright red mixed in. He commented as he looked over his grandfather figure. And I can count every individual hair in your stubble from here. It's really weird because I'm still seeing everything like normal with my right eye. I think I have perfect recall too, since I still remember how many I've counted from before, no matter how much I didn't care about that. You're most likely seeing my two primary nature affinities, which are earth and fire. What about Dragon-san next to me? The Hokage said with a hint of mischief in his voice. Naruto shifted his gaze to her and frowned. Oi, you're really taking this secret identity thing rather far. You're just a blank outline in my eyesight. I'm guessing some sort of a jamming seal or something. Something like that. Dragon replied with mirth clear in her distorted voice. The Hokage stepped close and observed Naruto's new Sharingan with obvious interest. I'll say this about Kurama-san, she certainly did a good job differentiating this from a normal Sharingan. He remarked as Dragon slipped a handheld mirror into Naruto's hand. Taking a deep breath, he raised it to his face, and his eyes widened. Naruto's right eye was the shining cerulean blue he always saw in any mirror all his life. However, his old left eye definitely was replaced by something different. A piercing ice blue iris around a black pupil was staring back at him. It felt to him like it was looking right through him as he searched his face with it. It was clear this would be now his most distinctive feature. No one would ever forget seeing this, even with just a quick glance. Wow, it definitely doesn't look like a Sharingan now. He murmured, very pleased with the results. I wouldn't be so quick to make that claim. Look closer at your iris. The Hokage cut in with a knowing smile. Naruto frowned and focused his gaze on that part. He raised his eyebrows when he noticed three blotchy white marks, shaped vaguely like tomos, surrounding the pupil. Instead of standing out sharply like in a regular Sharingan, they looked like they were blending in within the iris's ice blue color. They were hard to notice except for anyone observant enough. I tried my best, but that's all I could do without risking damage to the Sharingan. This is well beyond what I was expecting. You've been a great help and thank you, Kurama. Naruto thought sincerely and he felt Kurama beam brightly at the praise. How are you feeling, Naruto-kun? You should be feeling some of your chakra draining from using the Sharingan. The Hokage queried with a curious frown. Naruto jolted as he finally noticed something he felt was missing since he opened his left eye. Actually, I'm not feeling anything. If there's any power drain at all, I can't feel it. He replied with a confused frown. Are you sure it's on? Considering I'm counting each individual hair in your nostrils right now even though I don't want to, I'm pretty sure it's on, Hokage Gigi. Naruto retorted with deadpan. The embarrassed third cleared his throat and Dragon's shoulders shook as she tried not to laugh. Yes. I was hoping that'd work. Did you do something? Remember when we saw that Scarecrow's Sharingan is permanently on? I couldn't change that with this one, but I had a close look at the eye and saw just how it greedily sucked up chakra. However, I noticed it only needed a certain amount, so I tweaked your chakra pathways around your socket enough so that they only provided the needed chakra for the Sharingan to stay activated. It must have been a tiny amount because I'm not feeling anything right now. Considering your huge capacity and how much I managed to assimilate this eye to work efficiently with your system, you'd have to keep that eye open for days before you'd even begin to feel drained. Since you go to sleep every night, therefore closing the eye and restoring what little chakra it managed to drain, that's not going to be an issue at all. The only bad news is that I may have locked up the Mangekyu version somehow in the process. We'll have to find a way to reactivate it in the future, if we can. A surprised Naruto relayed all of this to the equally stunned Hokage and Dragon. The loss of the Mangekyu Sharingan isn't a big blow for now. You would have had to spend likely years on learning any technique related to that, so you shouldn't worry too much about forcing it out. You'll need time to get used to the normal Sharingan for now in any case. The Hokage spoke as he rubbed his chin in thought. However, at least in chakra efficiency, you've really improved on the normal Sharingan. The Uchihas would have killed for this if they were still alive, he added in awe. And all it took was the world's most powerful entity sealed in me in order for this to be tweaked like that. Naruto slightly rebuked with a smile, and the Hokage became forlorn at the thought and what it cost to achieve that. Don't get me wrong, Hokage Gigi. It worked out just fine for us both in the end, but I can't imagine it being that way with anyone else. The blonde added as he patted his stomach before hopping off the table to stretch. Oi, would you pass me some fresh bandages for wrapping around my head, please? he requested of Dragon, who moved to do just that. The Hokage frowned. Is there a problem? No, but since this is a secret operation, it would be strange to everyone that I just got a shiny new eye a few days after losing the old one. From now on, I'd rather everyone thinks I still have one working eye, except for my friends. This new eye is too distinctive and unforgettable, even though it's totally badass. The blonde explained just as he took the bandages from Dragon and began wrapping it securely over his left eye. The Hokage nodded approvingly. I would have suggested that sooner or later since deception is a large part of a shinobi's life after all. However, I can't imagine you needing to cover up your eye if you didn't need to keep it closed to conserve chakra, like Kakashi-kun. He pointed out. I've had a chat with Ero Sennin last night about this, and I might have a possible solution. However, before that, I feel like having a bit of fun. Naruto grinned foxily as if he was planning a prank. Dragon's body twitched slightly as she remembered seeing that dreaded smile too many times to count. Back in the hospital room, it has to be a new eye. That's the only reason, right? Kiba asked of the bedridden Jiraiya. Shikamaru, Choji, and Shino leaned in to listen for the answer. Huddled in a group on the other side of Naruto's bed, Anko, Ino, and Hinata perked their heads up to hear this too. The Toad Sage smirked amusedly, and it was clear to everyone that he knew but was going to drag this out. Oh. What makes you think so, boys? Troublesome, we saw Naruto before he left this room. With the exception of his eye, he looks as healthy as anyone could ever be. Yet, instead of going toward the main exit in the opposite direction or anywhere else, he went with Hokage-sama toward the surgery wing. With what the women overheard about an offer Hokage-sama made to Naruto yesterday, it's almost impossible to think this was anything other than an eye transplant. Shikamaru spoke in a bored tone. I see what you mean, but I'm sure you'll find out any minute. Jiraiya replied evasively with an amused smirk at the annoyed expressions on most of the room's occupants. Just then, the door slid open and everyone shifted their attention, expecting to greet their favorite blonde. However, what they saw stunned them into silence. It was certainly Naruto at the doorway. However, to their growing horror, he was sporting the duck-ass hairstyle similar to Sasuke. He was also wearing a high-collared black shirt with orange shorts, and had his hands stuffed into the pockets. He was slouching with a scowl on his face, and his eyes, one his normal blue and the other a glowing red Sharingan, were showing visible contempt for everything around him. Jiraiya realized what Naruto was doing and smirked. Looks like you got your new eye implanted nice and easy, Gaki. He played along. Naruto just let out a grunt to acknowledge Jiraiya as he stepped into the room. Everyone stared and blinked like they didn't want to believe their eyes. Oi! What the hell's this? Anko finally exclaimed after a long moment of silence. Isn't it obvious? I just got a Sharingan implanted. Now I have this sudden urge to be an asshole, prefer only men, and get vengeance for my clan. Naruto grunted contemptibly in a perfect imitation of Sasuke, before grinning brightly. Everyone at this point realized he was joking and snorted at his portrayal of the young Uchiha. You're lucky that was a prank because I would have cut your new eye out otherwise. Anko muttered as she twirled a kunai around her fingers. Naruto and the others sweet-dropped at how seriously she said that with no hesitation at all. Oi, change back. Even if it's back into that orange outfit, I can't stand seeing you look anything like Sasuke for even a second. Ino pleaded. Anko and Hinata nodded frantically next to her. Naruto chuckled as he released his henge and popped back to his normal orange-clad self with his left eye covered. So you got a Sharingan. Shikamaru stated neutrally. The room fell silent as everyone looked at Naruto, who smiled nervously and nodded. Yeah, is that going to be a problem with any of you? I don't care as long as you're still able to kick ass. Kiba declared forcefully. Indeed. Like having the Kyuubi in you, this one will not change who you are either, Naruto-san. Shino added. As long as it doesn't affect your ability to eat. I enjoy our eating contests. Choji chimed in pleasantly. I'm just happy you have two working eyes again. Ino said brightly as she linked arms with Naruto's left. Hinata nodded and linked hers with his right. You will do great things with it, Naruto-kun. I know it, she said with an encouraging smile. Anko wrapped her arms around Naruto's neck from behind and he blushed at the feel of her large breasts pressing against his back. Guess that means you're gonna improve just a little. You might actually be able to get a solid hit on me in our next spar. She teased next to his ear. I guess you're just going to be more troublesome. Shikamaru quipped with a smirk. Thanks, everyone. Naruto said thickly as he inclined his head gratefully. Oi, Yaki, mind showing us the shiny new model? I know the fox would have gotten it in perfect working order by now. Jiraiya cut in. Naruto nodded before starting to unwrap the bandages around his head. I only covered this up because I don't want anyone else other than the ones I trust to realize I have a new eye. I think I'm going to use that to my advantage for as long as I can, so I'll be using an eye patch or something. He explained as the bandages fell away, and he opened his left eye to display the incredibly sharp ice blue eye for everyone to see. The men nodded, impressed, and the women gasped appreciatively. Wow. You make that look work, Naruto-kun. Ino remarked with a bright blush. She especially liked it when the eye shifted to her and seemed to pierce sharply through her. It was a turn on, in her opinion. She noticed Hinata was just standing next to her panting slightly with a dazed expression, apparently struck speechless. She grinned and nudged her friend gently to jolt her out of her reverie. Enko smirked as she wondered how much the knowledge that a Sharingan had the ability to study and memorize every single detail would turn on any woman lucky enough to get in bed with Naruto. She slightly licked her lips as she was imagining herself in that position. It felt just right and good, especially with that eye searching over and memorizing every inch of her panting and sweat-covered naked body trembling with pleasure. You certainly won't have any problem picking up ladies left and right, Gaki. Jiraiya remarked with a grin. Naruto chuckled and shook his head. I don't know about that. Besides, this'll be covered up most of the time anyway. Not while we're alone if I have anything to say about it. Hinata breathed out quietly with her eyes just about glazed over. Ino and Enko heard that, and nodded in agreement. Yo. A deep voice drawled out and everyone turned in surprise to see Kakashi standing in the doorway into the room. He was waving lazily and checking each person out until his single eye landed on Naruto. His eye then widened comically, and everyone were confused at what was causing that reaction in him. The one-eyed Junin slowly lifted his trembling hand to point lamely at a befuddled Naruto. My long-lost Ototo, he whispered out dramatically. Naruto picked up on the lead in right away and his confused expression immediately switched to teary. Ni-san, the one-eyed blonde whispered back just as dramatically. Everyone around them face-faulted just as Naruto dashed and jumped into Kakashi's open arms. Ototo. Ni-san. They hugged each other for all it was worth for a few seconds. Everyone jeered and chuckled at the comedy skit as they broke apart and bowed mockingly at the hips. So what brings you here, Kakashi? Jiraiya queried after everyone settled down. Just wanted to see how Naruto here is doing. I'm glad to see you're alright after what you went through. Kakashi said as he ruffled Naruto's hair a bit. I also heard you'll be Konoha's newest Sharingan user. I was just asked by Hokage-sama to teach you about using the Sharingan for as long as it's needed. Not that he had to since I would have done it regardless. He added. Naruto beamed at the news. Cool. Does that mean you'll be my Junin sensei when I graduate? He asked excitedly, but the Junin shrugged. To be honest, it won't take much time to learn how to use the Sharingan effectively. The rest will be instincts. What I'm offering you are tips on how to use it in fights and other situations. You learn fast, so I wouldn't be surprised if you understood all I knew about the Sharingan in just a few months, and then you'll be able to branch out on your own from that point onward. With that, it doesn't necessarily mean I will be assigned as your sensei. It is still up to Hokage-sama to decide that. He explained. Naruto nodded, a little disappointed he still hadn't found out who his sensei would be yet. He decided to change subjects. The important thing right now is I need an eye patch or something to cover my eye. I'm getting tired of instantly memorizing everything I see in high detail. I don't need to know you have 5 nose hair sticking out, Ero Senin. He quipped as he shut his left eye to halt that effect. Jiraiya loudly slapped a hand over his nose in surprise while everyone chuckled. An eye patch, huh? Kakashi drawled out suddenly. Naruto turned to the Junin with a cautious expression. Before you say anything, Kakashi-sensei, I think I need to point out that only you can make the Hitai 8 thing work. I don't think it'll happen the same way with me. He said carefully. His friends grimaced at the image in their heads while Kakashi chuckled. Even I know that, Naruto. When I heard you lost your eye, I went ahead and found an eye patch that I thought would fit you. he stated as he dug around in his Junin vest for a moment before taking out something. Here, give this a try. I think it'll be a good look for you. He held out a pitch black piece of leather. Naruto retrieved it and looked down at it closely as he turned his back to everyone. Oh cool. I see the seal for sticking, that's why there's no elastic band on this, also why this was leather instead of cloth, easier for etching seals, he mumbled as he continued to check out whatever was in his hands with everyone behind him growing impatient. Yeah, I used something similar in my previous post. Kakashi said mysteriously, a little shy about revealing his Anbu past in front of many people. He wasn't able to wear a Hitai-8 underneath his dog mask and needed an eye patch similar to the one he gave the blonde. Naruto turned to Jiraiya. Arrow Sennin, what we talked about last night, think it's possible to put those on this. I see what you're thinking, Gaki, and I don't see why it's not doable. We'll just make the seal arrays as small as possible and I think your Sharingan will be a big help in that regard as you etch them on. Jiraiya said as he scratched his chin in thought. Naruto blinked in realization. I totally forgot about the benefits the new eye would have on Fuinjutsu, but I'll think about that later. Kakashi-sensei, would it offend you if I etch more seals on this, since it's a gift from you? He said as he turned back to the gray-haired Junin, who waved it off lazily. Ma, go ahead and do anything you want with that. It's yours now. Let's see if it'll fit me well enough first, though. Naruto announced with a grin. Finally. Kiba, Ino, and Anko grumbled at the same time from behind, making the blonde jolt in surprise. He was so in his world about seals he had forgotten his friends were still here. He threw a sheepish grin over his shoulder before he bent down to attach the eye patch onto his left socket. After taking a long moment to correct the fit, he perked his head up. Wow, the sticking seal is really strong. It feels like if I went through that avalanche again, it'd never fall off. He remarked as he turned around to show everyone the new accessory. They all saw a pitch black eye patch that didn't have the familiar circular shape, but seemed rather angular with straight lines instead. It fit perfectly into where the brow met the nose bridge and molded halfway down the side of his nose before it then turned sharply to cover the entire socket until it wrapped around to end halfway down his temple. It was a sleek fit that sat just flush within the socket. One might have said it looked like it was truly made for the contours of Naruto's face all along. Overall, it wasn't very elaborate, despite the novelty of a sticking seal instead of an elastic band. However, combine the masculine and angular shape of the eye patch with the new scar and it seemed to have improved Naruto's overall looks quite a bit. Hinata and Ino wondered how much more rugged he would look when he got older and gained more defined masculine features. With that image in their heads, they unconsciously swallowed to wet their suddenly dry mouths. You didn't just happen to find this lying around in a shop, did you? This fits me too perfectly. Naruto said as he turned with an inquisitive frown toward Kakashi. The Junin chuckled nervously. Caught me already, huh? I had it custom made. He admitted with a sheepish pose. How did you manage to get this to fit just right? All these angles would have dug into my skin, but instead, this is easily the most comfortable thing in the world. Ah, this calls for the first bit of knowledge about your new Sharingan. Kakashi began with a raised finger and Naruto quickly adopted an interested expression. Memorizing the curves and contours of a person's body and face with the Sharingan can be very useful for this, and many other situations. With some practice, you can easily figure out the measurements you need to get any clothing or accessory tailor-made for anyone. It's also how I usually form a perfect henge after looking at someone for just an instant. Kakashi lectured and Naruto nodded, impressed. The women balked a little at this. If Naruto wanted to after he's had some practice, he could easily figure out their private measurements. They were also grateful that it would have been too obvious for Kakashi to check women out since he would have had to lift his Hitai-8 and expose his distinctively red Sharingan. After some time, everyone was chatting quietly among themselves until the door slid open and an attractive nurse's head popped into view. Everyone, I'm here to inform you the visiting hours will be over. Please prepare to leave soon. Her announcement tapered off at the end as she blushed visibly at the sight of Naruto with his eye patch, making Hinata, Ino, and Anko frown possessively. Wow, aren't you a handsome young man, Naruto-kun? The nurse commented airily with a little sexy smirk that made Naruto blush. She then disappeared from the doorway with 3 pairs of eyes following her departure, murder burning in them. Damn, I'm so jealous. That gorgeous nurse didn't even look at the other guys in this room. Kiba quipped good-naturedly as he nudged a sheepish Naruto. Ah, watching my godson grow into quite the lady killer is a beautiful thing. Jiraiya remarked fondly as he pretended to wipe a tear from his cheek. It's not like I asked for this. Naruto retorted with an annoyed frown as he pointed at his eye patch. Ah, so you acknowledge the effect your new look may have on some ladies. Kakashi said sagely with a nod. It's hard not to when Hinata-chan's making some visible effort to not pounce on me. Naruto retorted with a teasing smirk toward a fidgeting Hinata, making her duck her head in slight embarrassment at everyone's chuckling. Oi, I'll be staying one more night here with Ero Sennin. I have a project I'd like to do with him overnight, then I'll be outta here tomorrow. Naruto announced, making some of his friends groan in disappointment at not getting to spend time or eat with him tonight. Before long, everyone began to filter out and, eventually, Ino and Hinata were the last to leave. They and Naruto stepped outside into the empty hallway for some privacy from Jiraiya. Bye, Naruto-kun. I'll let you two have some time alone. Ino called out with a knowing smirk as she moved down to the end of the hall to wait for Hinata. Blushing, Hinata stepped into an equally blushing Naruto's waiting arms and hugged tightly, pressing her body up against him. You're cruel, Naruto-kun. She whispered into his chest. Naruto smirked as he rested his chin on the top of her head. It's not my fault someone promised her dad and sister that she would be back home tonight. That was because I assumed you would leave today, Naruto-kun. You're already back to perfect health too. She almost whined as she snuggled some more into his chest for as much body contact she could manage before having to leave. I'm grateful to you for staying by my side all this time while I was under, Hinata-chan. However, I'm sure Hiyashi-sama and Hanabi-chan misses you a lot by now. We'll have plenty of opportunities to do this from now on, I promise. He said as he planted a soft kiss in her hair, making her sigh contentedly. Besides, Ero Sennin will be leaving the village soon and I'm not sure when I'll see him again. At the very least, I'd like to spend some time with him. He added. Hinata all of a sudden felt selfish and she looked down guiltily. Naruto smiled and gently lifted her chin to make her look into his uncovered eye. Don't worry, I want to do this with you a lot. He said as he leaned in to kiss her softly on her lips, making her moan slightly as she instinctively clutched at his back with both hands. I'm a little greedy too. He finished with a grin as he pulled back, leaving her flushed with her lips partially open as if she was still feeling the lingering sensation of the kiss. Wow, I think that will last me for the evening. She breathed out with a dazed expression. They chuckled as they continued to hug for a long moment before slowly releasing each other and said their reluctant goodnights. It took Hinata a little while to move down the hall since she kept stopping every several meters to glance back and wave until she finally reached a snickering Ino. They waved at him for the last time before disappearing around the corner to walk each other home. Naruto grinned at how cute Hinata was just now, and he was happy to know how much she loved him. Stepping back into the room, he moved to sit at Jiraiya's bedside. As it became nighttime outside, only the lamp on Jiraiya's bedside table was providing any light in this darkening room. He noticed his godfather was staring out the window at a waning moon with a forlorn expression. Sighing, the blonde shook his head. Oi, don't worry so much over this. Look at it this way, I came out of this a little stronger and better. He assured. Jiraiya snapped to his godson with an angry expression. This shouldn't have happened in the first place. First I don't see you for years, thinking sensei would take care of you in the meantime. That didn't turn out so well for all of us. After that, I promised myself I'd spend time teaching and help you become strong enough to take on the world, like your parents would have wanted. The moment I let you go out there alone, you lost your eye and nearly got killed. It's my fault this happened to you. I wouldn't be able to face your parents in the afterlife if you had passed away on the table. One of the nurses told me your heart stopped for 1 minute and 14 seconds, he growled out, his glare challenging Naruto to tell him otherwise, and they stared at each other in silence for a long moment. Finally, Naruto broke off with a sigh. If we're going to do this blame game, then it's my fault too. I knocked Sai's ass around then mocked Danzo and his root. I riled him up so much that he started all of this. Ultimately, I nearly died because of my cockiness. Don't ever say that. He never once thought of you as human, and I will not allow you or anyone else to ever give that old shit any benefit of the doubt. Naruto ripped his eye patch off to glare at Jiraiya with both eyes. It struck the Toad Sage speechless at how the ice blue Sharingan seemed to easily pierce right through him. He had his share of arrogant Uchihas glaring at him with their glowing red Sharingan in the past, but none of them had anything on the ice-cold glare from Naruto's modified Sharingan. He also noticed something else. If you're not going to let me blame myself, then you should know why I'm not going to let you blame yourself. This happened because of an unlikely series of events, and we should be grateful that neither of us died, or even got permanently disabled in my case. On the other hand, the other side lost 10 men, and I have to say that's some goddamn good results, all things considered. Naruto spoke firmly as he kept his glare trained on Jiraiya, who was still staring speechless at the Sharingan. The blonde realized this and shut his left eye. Sorry, I didn't think that would work so well. He murmured guiltily. Jiraiya jerked out of his daze and shook his head. It's not that, Gaki. Have a look in the mirror. There's an interesting effect we didn't notice until it was dark enough, like now. Frowning at the vague suggestion, he stood to head into the unlit attached washroom. What he saw as he opened his left eye in front of the mirror surprised him as he saw a glowing ice blue iris staring back at him. Kurama, care to explain this? Don't blame me. A regular Sharingan glows red in the dark, so apparently your eye kept that effect despite the extensive changes. It worked out for the best, though. Imagine your enemies seeing this if you were fighting them in the dark. Especially when it's mixed with that. Kurama whispered the last word in clear awe as she watched Naruto's right eye beginning glow red from using a little of her chakra. The blonde shivered as he watched a floating pair of glowing eyes, one being a cold ice blue color and the other a sinister crimson slit, stare right back at him in the darkness. Damn, even I feel a little nervous seeing my own reflection right now. I find it rather fetching, especially after I imagine the terrified expressions on your enemies' faces when they see these as you slice them into pieces. I think it's very interesting. I have two sadistic and bloodthirsty women in my life who also happen to secretly enjoy cuddling and flirting with me. Naruto, you're not going to have a normal life. What makes you think the women you know will be normal as well? Oi. Enko-chan aside, I think Hinata-chan and Ino-chan are normal enough. They're still growing. Give them time. Kurama retorted with clear mirth. Naruto sighed as he shook his head before stepping out of the bathroom back into the mostly dark hospital room. He was befuddled for a second when he noticed his godfather bolt upright in the bed with an alarmed expression and was apparently reaching around for anything to use as a weapon. He realized his mistake and slapped a hand over his right eye, which was still glowing crimson. Oi. It's me. I was just trying out the fox eye with the Sharingan. By the way, I think I'm going to like this new eye because your priceless expression is now burned into my mind. He said with a laugh. Oh damn it, you little bastard. That scared years off my lifespan. Jiraiya muttered grouchily as he calmed down, putting a bedpan he was about to use as a weapon back down on the floor. I guess this'll work on my enemies if this could surprise the great Jiraiya-sama of the Sannin this much. Naruto teased as he sat at the Toad Sage's bedside. Meanwhile, Kurama was laughing uproariously in the background. Jiraiya smirked as he shook his head in mock defeat. I'll be damned if I said that wasn't effective. Be careful using that around your allies though. He advised and Naruto nodded his acknowledgement before sighing. Look, what we talked about before, there's no point blaming every little thing over this. So why don't we just blame the snake bastard for all of this and move on? He suggested. Jiraiya grinned and nodded. Sure, let's pile everything on him. Sorry, but I just remembered your fake name is still your own damn fault, Tanoshi Otoko. Naruto rebuked with an evil smirk. Fuck you, Gaki. Are you ever going to let me live that down? Jiraiya grumbled. Naruto just shook his head with a grin, before he brought out his eye patch. Moving on, got that etching tool lying around somewhere. I figure we could get started on what we talked about. Jiraiya nodded before he reached for a scroll, with his possessions sealed in it, on the bedside table. In a moment, they began their project and were enjoying chatting with each other. This went on well into the early morning hours. Early next morning at the 42nd training field. I see you're a little excited to play with your new toys, Naruto-kun. Yugao observed with clear amusement in her voice. She and Naruto were now standing in the middle of a large clearing with a deep ravine on one side. She bumped into the blonde doing his morning run around the village and was interested in being the first to see his skills with the swords, so she offered to come along as a sparring partner. Naruto had already unsealed his sabers as soon as they arrived and he was now checking over them and cleaning them to get them ready for use. The blonde shifted his uncovered eye toward Yugao with a grin. The female Anbu had to admit Naruto looked like a different person with that black eye patch covering his left eye. He looked more mature and masculine now, and she realized sadly that this cruel world forced him to grow up more quickly than most other people ever since he was born. Well, considering I was almost killed just a few days after getting these sabers and I still haven't had a chance to use them, I figured I might as well at least practice with them even just once before anything else happens. I'll bet a potted plant would fall off a balcony above me and crack my skull wide open on the way home today. The blonde spoke lightly, but Yugao frowned at his morbid humor. You think so lowly of your life. It's not that. I survived 3 brushes with death and I still haven't graduated yet. I don't see that improving when I'm an official shinobi. Well, I suppose I'm not going to worry about a potted plant killing you. Enko-chan always told me you have a head dense enough to break swords on it. Yugao retorted with a teasing tone as Naruto shrugged. Yeah, let's make fun of the guy who was too stupid to notice the signs from Hinata-chan for years. He grumbled lazily. Not only her, she whispered with a smirk. You say something. Nope, must be the wind. She deflected smartly as a gentle breeze blew around them. Naruto shrugged and got to his feet. He unsheathed 2 of the sabers laid out neatly on the ground and looked them over as he held them out in front of them pointing skyward. The blue-tinted edges were picking up the morning sunlight easily and Yugao had to inwardly admire how beautiful the sabers were. She also felt a sense of unease beginning to grow inside her as she watched her sparring partner take a few practice swings with the sabers and they made sharp cutting sounds through the air. They were music to her ears, but she also understood just how deadly those sabers were. She had known the blonde trained for years to finally be able to use his sabers in this world instead of his mindscape, but she had to wonder at just how fast Naruto was already becoming familiar with the sabers he hadn't used before now. Her instincts as a swordswoman were now screaming at her to be cautious of this young man before her, that he would easily slice her into pieces if he wanted to. The fact about them having been friends for years didn't matter to her at this moment as she watched how gracefully Naruto handled his new sabers. This was a real live swordsman that has now taken the place of her kind and funny friend as soon as he unsheathed these sabers. She bet he felt the same about her now as she was unsheathing her ninjutsu to prepare for the spar. She was proven right when she noticed Naruto's one eye shift to her warily as her blade cut through the air as well. His usual grin slowly faded out as he focused his attention on Yugao doing some practice swings. The atmosphere grew tense little by little as long minutes passed. Don't you need more time to get used to the loss of your depth perception or at least take your eye patch off? Yugao broke the terse silence finally as she lowered her sword. Naruto visibly relaxed at this sight as he stuck the saber in his left hand into the ground, then he reached up to his eye patch. Oh, Enko-chan didn't tell you I stayed behind last night to do a Fuinjutsu project with Ero Sennin. He said as he peeled it off and tossed it to Yugao. Put it on and you'll see the results. He added as he briefly displayed his brilliant ice blue Sharingan before shutting it to avoid the risk of anyone else seeing it. That sight did some funny things with Yugao's insides a little bit and she had to admit he looked even more handsome with that eye. Shaking it off inwardly, she brought the eye patch up and she noticed several small seal arrays etched into the inside as she put it on. Since it was tailor-made for Naruto, it wasn't a perfect fit but she got it on nonetheless. She was a little surprised when she felt it stick to her skin suddenly and, with a shimmer, the eye patch became completely see-through. Wow, she breathed out while she looked around the clearing for a moment, quite able to see out both eyes as if the eye patch wasn't even there. She turned her attention to a grinning Naruto. As you probably can guess, we put a seal on it that makes it entirely see-through from the inside with a little bit of chakra being the only thing it cost to activate each time I put it on. I don't need to take it off in battles or whatever other situations call for it. That'll give me some advantages when enemies think they were attacking my blind side or underestimating me. I'd also like to add you still look rather beautiful even with that on. He said lightly with a grin, making Yugao blush a little as she peeled the eye patch off to pass it back to him. For some reason, she had a feeling it wasn't just flattery and he really meant it. Thanks for the demonstration, Playboy. I can imagine you being able to copy jutsu whenever you wanted to because no one would suspect you have the Sharingan activated under that. Yugao pointed out, but Naruto frowned as he fitted the eye patch back on. I don't like the idea of being able to copy almost any jutsu everywhere I look, especially the ones my allies worked so hard to learn. With that in mind, we added one more seal array. It was something Ero Sennin was working on to counter the Sharingan until when the Uchihas were killed off. We just finished it yesterday. It blocks the Sharingan's ability to see chakra in anyone, making it impossible to copy any jutsu precisely. We then had a happy accident when we learned its memorizing ability relied on chakra too, and it was also blocked. That's a good thing since I was literally feeling my brain fill up with all the stuff I didn't want to remember. Right now, I just have really good vision out the left eye and I can live with that on a daily basis. He explained his eye patch's capabilities to a surprised Yugao. So you'd have to take it off in battles then. She finally pointed out a potential issue after a moment's thought. Naruto shook his head with a mischievous grin and tapped his left index finger on the side of his eye patch. With a quick application of my chakra to this spot, I can turn the inhibiting seal off if I need to and no one would know. Fuinjutsu is amazing, isn't it? He said with a chuckle. Yugao smirked and nodded her head in respect for his skills. Naruto then yanked his saber out of the ground and raised both of them into the air to form an X above his head. Yugao's eyes widened in alarm and quickly brought her sword up in front of her, her palms already becoming sweaty on the hilt at the potential threat in front of her. Ero Sennin is getting out of the hospital any minute and I have to meet him in a little while before he leaves Konoha. I'm afraid we'll have to keep this short. The eye patch is activated so you don't have to worry about me accidentally copying your style and techniques. Naruto spoke calmly, his visible eye focusing on her as if she was his newest prey. Yugao swallowed a little as she sensed how much more powerful and deadly this young man became with the sabers compared to when he wasn't using them just a moment ago. She had eliminated many enemies with her ninjutsu so far in her career and considered the sword to be her pride and joy. However, it felt like it would do as well as a butter knife in her hands against him right now. She tensed her body to full awareness and prepared herself to go all out from the very onset. She would not take it easy on Naruto this time. Naruto grinned as he began to step forward, his sabers still crossed above his head. The growing threat of the spar beginning any second pressed down heavily on the female ANBU's body, but it didn't seem to affect the blonde. That irritated and scared her at the same time. Any sword expert understood that to strike first in a duel would usually lead to defeat. However, as she felt her body instinctively move forward and preparing to swing her ninjutsu downward in a preemptive strike against the briefly surprised Naruto, Yugao knew if she had waited for him to begin, it would have meant certain loss for her. As she pushed every inch of her body into going all out, the female Anbu thanked every deity out there for Uzumaki Naruto being on her side, and she pitied the poor bastards that would go up against him anytime he unsheathed his sabers from now on. 30 minutes later, Gecko Hayate cursed his condition as he involuntarily coughed once again. Ever since he inhaled some poison gas released by an enemy long ago, his lungs never fully recovered from that and he was having a particularly bad episode today. He also received some bad news from the Hokage in addition to that, so his mood wasn't the best despite his usual laid-back demeanor. He needed to find his girlfriend and inform her, which was why he was hopping on the tree limbs through a forest, toward training ground 42. Considering how much she talked about Uzumaki Naruto as a potential swordsman, and the fact some people saw him with a purple-haired woman heading off toward the training fields helped him easily deduce where she would have been right now. Jumping clear of the trees and landing in the large open area, Hayate frowned as he searched around only to find no sign of either Naruto or Yugao right away. Coughing through another fit, he wondered if he needed to head over to Yugao's apartment and wait on her. However, a flash of purple caught his attention and he focused his gaze on a particular tree on the far edge of the clearing. Yugao was sitting against it and trembling slightly. He knew something had happened as he jogged up to her. Yugao-chan, he called out cautiously as he approached her. The beautiful woman perked her head up at hearing her name and smiled softly as she saw her boyfriend. She was covered in sweat and grime. Hayate-kun, I'm going to need some help getting home. She murmured tiredly as she lifted an arm to show that it was trembling violently from fatigue. Hayate raised an eyebrow. Did you get hurt? he quizzed with a concerned frown and a cough. It's not that. After Naruto-kun left, I just lost strength when all the tension left me and can't really move for now. She clarified. Hayate nodded and carefully picked her up to drape her over his back in order to give her a piggyback ride back home. So, what happened with the Uzumaki boy? He queried as they began making their way into the forest toward the village. We just sparred, then he needed to take care of some business. That's it. It took all I had just to barely pull out a win over him, and it was only because I had more experience. She admitted softly. That made Hayate cough in surprise and snap his head around to look at her face with wide eyes. He knew from her expression she wasn't joking. That's not all. He had to refrain from doing killing or crippling strikes since this was a spar, and it was easy to tell his sword style comprised mostly of those kata. If this had been a duel to the death, I'm not confident I would come out alive, let alone get away with my body intact. He's going to be the best swordsman in Konoha, no question. She murmured in awe and Hayate grinned. She wasn't afraid to admit this, even to her own boyfriend who was currently Konoha's best swordsman that also trained her. He always did like her honesty. So the boy's already got at least one admirer. He teased. Yugao blushed a little, glad he wasn't able to see it from her position on his back. I think you'd change your mind about calling him a boy if you met him, Hayate-kun. She rebuked. Perhaps so, but it won't be anytime soon, unfortunately. Oh no, don't tell me it's another long-term mission. Afraid so, Yugao-chan. Genma and I have been requested to go to the land of Tea to guard a client for however long he needs. He's a very wealthy politician and made a lot of enemies within the local Yazuka. The Yazuka's reported to be full of Ronin samurai and missing nin, so we're fairly sure this will go on for months. Hayate replied sadly before Yugao slapped a hand on his back in frustration. You were gone for 3 months earlier this year. It's the nature of the work we do. You should understand that, Yugao-chan. I know. It's just that, when you got back, I only saw you for a little bit before I went on my own long-term mission until just a couple weeks ago. I was starting to get used to seeing you on a regular basis again, Hayate-kun. She murmured sadly as she squeezed her arms around his neck and buried her face against his back. At least you found a new sparring partner in your new object of admiration. Hayate pointed out with a grin. Yugao blushed again, and it annoyed her that he and Anko were the only ones able to easily tease her like this. Naruto was about to become another one soon enough, though. Hokage-sama was kind enough to give me and Genma 2 days off before we would need to leave. He also asked me to relay to you that there are no Anbu duties for you for just as long. A rather happy coincidence, I would say. He added lightly with a smile. Yugao smiled happily and hugged him from behind again. I don't suppose you'd know what we'll do for the next 2 days? She innocently asked before forming a saucy smirk, knowing full well what were on their minds at that moment. I'm pretty sure I can think of a couple things. Around the same time in a secure location, wow. This is where you normally train, Hokage Gigi. Naruto remarked in wonder as he stared around this training ground. It wasn't much different from others with the exception of the large clearing being ringed by many wooden totems with a large wooden statue, as tall as a normal tree, sitting at one point in the circle. It reminded him of a Buddha statue he saw once because of how serene it looked as it sat cross-legged with its hands together in a permanent prayer. However, this one was thinner and it had multiple arms sticking out from behind to form a half circle as if a large fan was affixed to its back. He felt Kurama frown at the sight. Something bothering you, Kurama. It's just a memory from long ago. You'll see what I mean soon enough. I see you've noticed the totems and the statue, Naruto-kun. They were created by Hashirama-sensei to help provide security and privacy while anyone trains here. Normally only a Hokage should use this, but all 4 of us have made special exceptions, like I did for my ex-students. The Hokage's voice cut in from behind Naruto. He turned around to see the third and Jiraiya standing side by side. Jiraiya was now fully recovered and clothed in his usual outfit. He also had all of his stuff sealed in the large scroll on his back. It was apparent to Naruto that his godfather was going to leave the village after this. So why are we here? He asked neutrally, pushing that depressing thought aside. Dumbass. You're smart enough to understand that if sensei allowed you to come here, he's already giving you permission to use this field once in a while, Gaki. Jiraiya said gruffly while the Hokage nodded with a smile. The blonde beamed excitedly at this news. According to your report, you were successful in obtaining full transformation with Kurama-san's chakra, so I decided it would be best if you practice using the technique twice a week here instead of waiting until another opportunity to safely travel out of Konoha comes along. The third explained, and Naruto frowned. How would this particular field let me transform without having the entire village piss themselves every time they feel Kurama's chakra? Or definitely not far enough out of Konoha for that. That's the purpose of the statue and the totems. The Hokage replied with a raised finger before he began walking over to the statue with Naruto and Jiraiya falling into step behind him. Naruto-kun, Kurama-san's chakra isn't the only thing around here that could frighten the villagers and some of our weaker shinobi. I may be an old man, but my power is still great enough to have the same effect whenever I go all out in my training. It was the same for the Sannin, your father, Tobirama-sensei, and Hashirama-sensei. Especially the first Hokage. The Hokage spoke as he came to a stop in front of the statue. Naruto-kun, have you tried copying any jutsu yet? He asked as he turned to the blonde, who adopted a neutral expression. I haven't yet. Why? I'd like for you to memorize this sequence and how the chakra molds. It's how you'll activate the security measures here. Naruto sighed as he tapped a chakra-infused fingertip to the side of his eye patch. I can see your chakra now, and I repeat that this really feels like cheating. He muttered while Jiraiya chuckled next to him. You'll get used to it, and I feel this is the correct way to use the Sharingan, Gaki. Of course you use it liberally against enemies. However, with allies, you ask their permission, and if anyone offers you any jutsu out of the blue, take it without question. Otherwise, it'd feel like an insult to them that the jutsu they worked so hard to learn wasn't considered worthy enough for you to spend a few seconds copying. Just be grateful you weren't raised an Uchiha. Most of them grew up learning it was their kami-given right to steal others' techniques and styles as if they all belonged to them. He said as he ruffled a hand through his godson's hair. Alright, I'll give it a try now. Naruto spoke more resolutely this time and focused his attention on the Hokage, closing his right eye to let only the Sharingan take it all in. The Hokage smiled and began doing a series of hand seals. Naruto easily memorized the entire sequence and he noted how the chakra molded in a specific way at certain points. He frowned when he thought the old man took a while to finish his sequence. Hokage Jiji, you don't have to slow down for me. I can still memorize everything if you go faster next time. He encouraged, but was confused when Jiraiya burst out laughing and the Hokage smiled mischievously as if he knew something Naruto didn't. It hit the blonde after a moment's thought. You went at your fastest speed possible, didn't you? Because of the Sharingan, you only looked slow to me. He deadpanned. The third grinned playfully as he nodded. No kidding. I barely kept up with him myself. Jiraiya laughed as he slapped a hand on Naruto's back. Let's see you try this, Naruto-kun. Press your palm against the circular indentation on this statue's stomach and say, Fuin. When you've finished the sequence. Naruto did as the Hokage asked and he watched in fascination as the statue lit up with a loud hum and what looked like solid walls of white light quickly spread out from it in both directions along the totems to form a circle. It was only half a second later when the two walls of light met on the opposite side of the clearing before the wall stretched upward and curved into a large dome that engulfed the entire clearing. Whoa, was all Naruto breathed out. This is how anyone was able to train here without worrying about any spy gathering information on the jutsu he or she uses. On the outside, this just looks like an empty and unassuming clearing, but we're hidden from anyone who may have somehow slipped past the rather extensive Anbu presence around this area. The barrier also prevents anyone outside from sensing any chakra being used here. In short, you may go wild with Kurama-san's chakra here and no one out there would be the wiser. To leave here, just do the same hand seals here but say, Kai, instead. The Hokage explained, enjoying the awestruck expression on the young man's face. After a minute of taking the sight and the information in, Naruto turned back to the older men with a grin. This is going to help a lot. Kurama and I thank you for this, Hokage Jiji. He said with a sincere nod. I also brought you here today because Jiraiya-kun and I are a little curious about how much stronger you are when fully transformed. Would it be possible to demonstrate this to us? I can try. It was kind of a blur the last time, though. Naruto replied uncertainly. Hang on. I'd like for you to copy one of my jutsu before we move on, Gaki. Jiraiya cut in and Naruto turned to him with a frown. He hesitated on what he wanted to say before nodding seriously as he remembered his godfather's words earlier. Good, you're already learning to appreciate the opportunities your Sharingan presents you, Gaki. I wanted you to learn this jutsu because it'll improve your defense and it'll also help you protect others as well. It's pretty simple to execute but also can be very effective depending on the amount of chakra you push into it. You've seen me use it plenty of times. Jiraiya explained as he readied his hands for sealing. Naruto narrowed his left eye as he prepared to copy his godfather's jutsu. Jiraiya grinned, before blurring through the hand seals and slamming a palm to the ground as he shouted. Doden. Doryuheiki. Earth wall. A large solid wall of earth rose out of the ground with a loud rumble and it towered over everyone. Naruto watched all of this with awe as his Sharingan automatically memorized everything. That's Doden. I don't have an affinity for earth. He pointed out as he remembered that detail. Just try it and push as much chakra as you think you'd need into it. One more thing, just because you copied a jutsu doesn't mean you've mastered it. I expect you to practice anything you copy if you're going to use it in the future, Gaki. Jiraiya ordered sternly and Naruto nodded quickly. He had no complaint about that since it would help him deal with the feeling of cheating on this in the long run. He moved a few meters away to put in some distance from the original wall. He then almost instinctively blurred through the seals he memorized and molded his chakra exactly like how Jiraiya did it. He slammed a hand on the ground and shouted. Doden. Doryuheiki. An equally large and impressive-looking earth wall rose out of the ground with a loud rumble. When the wall finished forming, Naruto straightened up with a slight pant. Whoa. I actually felt like I spent more chakra than even when I used both Datapa, Great Breakthrough, and Karyu Endant Dragon Flame Bullet, and that's the most chakra-consuming collaboration jutsu I have so far. Technically, anyone can actually do any jutsu, even the ones that didn't match their natural affinities. The problem is the amount of time required to learn any of these jutsu and then the abnormally high chakra cost afterward. Your Sharingan skips the long learning process and you can easily deal with the high cost because of your massive reserves. This is one of the many reasons why I wanted you as the sole candidate for this implant. Here is an explained. This is why I said to practice any jutsu you copy. Do it long enough, and it'll help reduce the chakra usage. Though, since we do have an affinity for earth, we're able to mold the earth walls in different ways, like spitting out a stream of mud to create walls anywhere it touched. You'll likely be unable to do that even if you copied exactly how we molded it that way. Jiraiya added. Naruto nodded in understanding, though he wasn't exactly enamored with the thought of spitting mud out through his mouth anyway. Wow, I can see why the Uchiha clan thought the sun shone out of their collective ass as long as they had this dojutsu. He remarked before he began to look uncertain. Jiraiya sighed exasperatedly, as he knew exactly what his godson was thinking, before putting a hand on the blonde's shoulder. You're not going to turn into an Uchiha. No matter what happens from here on, that Sharingan is your tool to command. Not the other way around. I know you'll put it to better use than most of the entire clan ever did in their long history. I'm proud of you for taking on this responsibility, and always remember you're not alone in this. You have people around you who'll support you and keep you grounded, including me. He spoke with a reassuring grin. Naruto nodded hesitantly, but hearing Jiraiya's words made him feel much better about this. Alright, let's move on, Gaki. Time to show what you got, then I'll have to leave. Jiraiya encouraged and the Hokage nodded his head as well. Naruto frowned as he realized a particular issue. Arrow Sennin, I don't really remember, but was I naked when you found me on that mountain? Jiraiya nodded grimly as he remembered the horrific sight of his godson's mangled body. That's going to be a problem. I was wearing my clothes before I changed. Apparently I'm going to shred them every time. Naruto concluded as he began stripping his clothes off. The men turned around to give him privacy. In the expert-level Fuijutsu book I gave you recently, there should be a seal array that allows you to automatically switch outfits or seal whatever you're wearing, Gaki. It can be painted anywhere on your body and you can modify it to automatically activate when it senses a certain action in your transformation and it then seals your clothes. Jiraiya spoke out as Naruto finished removing his outfit. That's a great idea. I could set it to activate when it senses a large amount of fur growing on my body. Thanks for the tip, Arrow Sennin. Okay, I'm going to do it now. Immediately, Kurama's presence washed over the men from behind like a powerful tidal wave, and they worked to resist every urge to turn around and take defensive stances. More waves splashed over them as Naruto continued to transform slowly. They winced as they listened to his bones growing and popping, his muscles stretching, and his straining voice changing in pitch from a growing teens to something very deep. What unnerved them the most was the sharp cracking sound of the ground underneath Naruto as it strained to support the extra mass from the transformation. After a long moment of the powerful presence beating down on their bodies, their anxiety about Naruto still having full control began to set in. Before long, they sighed in relief as they felt the raw and powerful presence finally begin to even out, and it became somewhat more controlled. Surprisingly, changing like this didn't hurt as much as I remember. Then again, most of my body had already been crushed into paste when I did this last time. Naruto's deeper voice boomed throughout the enclosed clearing. The older men turned around and their eyes widened when they saw nothing but a wall of large fur-covered muscles at their eye level. It took them too long a moment to realize they were staring at Naruto's new torso as it expanded and shrank with each rumbling breath. With their jaws slowly dropping open, they moved their heads up, and up until their eyes finally locked with the transformed Naruto's fierce crimson right eye. His left eye was still covered by the eye patch, but that only served to make him look even more menacing. "Okami," Hiruzen whispered with wide eyes. Anoichi's description of what he saw in that severed head's memories the other day didn't even come close. Jiraiya could only swallow loudly. The transformed Naruto bared his sharp and deadly fangs as he grinned mischievously, but it looked much more sinister than intended. "I see you're struck speechless by this handsome form. I'm really going to like the Sharingan if it's going to keep letting me commit those priceless expressions to memory," he rumbled out humorously. Few days later at a local weapon shop, the bell above the small and unassuming weapon store's front door chimed as Naruto stepped in. He took a moment to take in the various weapons, accessories, and outfits being offered for sale on shelves throughout the store and concluded Yugao was right when she spoke about this store selling nothing but quality products. "Welcome to the Broken Dagger. I believe this is the first time I've seen you here." A deep voice rumbled through the store, making Naruto snap his head toward the sales counter at the back. He frowned slightly as he took in a large, bald, and grizzled man with a long and bushy brown beard. He also looked like a walking mass of solid muscles upon muscles. "What's with weapons makers and their stereotypes?" he muttered quietly as he walked up to the counter. The large man apparently heard that and cocked an eyebrow with a grin. "Who else did you meet and what types do you think I follow?" he asked lightly as he crossed his massively thick arms over his chest, making him look very imposing over any other person the same size as Naruto. However, the blonde wasn't intimidated one bit as he stared up into the older man's dark brown eyes. "Let's see. Grizzled looking, huge, massive muscles, and supposedly very scary looking, but actually wouldn't hurt a fly in most situations. All of this despite the fact you create some of the deadliest looking weapons I've seen on display on these shelves," he observed nonchalantly. The large man and he spent a long silent moment staring at each other, before the man broke it with a rumbling chuckle. "I believe you may have gotten everything right about me. However, when my daughter's involved, there's no line I wouldn't cross," he admitted as he glared lightly at the blonde. This boy was close to his daughter's age and definitely had the good looks, especially with that eye patch. "I'll keep that in mind if I ever meet her. Uzumaki Naruto." Naruto promised sincerely before introducing himself as he reached out with a hand to shake with the large man. "Shiga Keita. I'm the owner of this store and I'll be helping you with whatever you may need today, Uzumaki-san." Keita spoke gruffly as he closely observed Naruto some more. He was impressed since this boy didn't act like a nervous little kid walking into a place like this for the first time. Instead, this blonde just calmly observed every detail he could see from where he stood for a moment before letting out a sigh as he reached behind to remove a small scroll from his waist pouch and laid it out on the counter. "Please call me Naruto. As for your other question earlier, the other weapon maker I met made these," he said as he applied some chakra to unseal all 6 of his new sabers. Keita's bushy eyebrows shot up as high as they could go while he slowly took in each of the sheathed sabers with his experienced eyes. He saw a tiny but familiar stylized M signature etched onto the inward curve of each saber's cross guard. "Well, I'll be damned. These were made by Masamune," he exclaimed as he carefully reached for one of the sabers and picked it up to unsheath it halfway in order to observe the beautiful and perfect gunmetal-colored blade that peeked out. Chakra metal as well. You don't see that old man make anything out of this type of metal often. These are gorgeous. You obviously know your stuff, Shiga-san. However, I just recently got them and I'm afraid I didn't take much time to think about how to secure these sabers to my body until now. I'm interested in having some sort of a two-piece harness system tailored to hold all 6 sabers. Naruto got to the point of his visit and Keita raised an eyebrow in interest. Please, if you insist on me calling you by your given name, you should call me by mine in return. Anyway, I think I already have a harness in mind. However, would you please clarify what you meant by two-piece, Naruto-san? My kenjutsu style calls for me to use 2 sabers primarily in any battle. However, in extreme situations I can adapt to using all 6. Keita-san, I was thinking I'd like the harness to be tailored in such a way that I can either unseal one piece with 2 sabers for normal situations, or unseal both pieces with all 6 sabers for extreme situations. Keita nodded in understanding as he listened to Naruto continue to describe his idea more in details. He also grinned inwardly since this was going to be a quick but fun project to work on. I'll need to take measurements and you'll have to come back every once in a while to have the harness adjusted as you grow, but it's certainly doable. Shall we begin, Naruto-san? He said as he took out a length of measuring tape. Naruto nodded with a happy grin, glad that he easily found someone to help make his idea come to fruition. After a few moments of discussion, Naruto decided to leave Keita to his business. As he waved goodbye while walking out of the store, he bumped into a brunette that was the same height as him. He quickly noticed her hair was done up in twin buns that made her look somewhat like a panda. Her white Chinese shirt and loose black training pants didn't help detract from that idea at all. He did find her rather cute, if not a little tomboyish. Excuse me. I wasn't watching where I was going, and I'm sorry. He quickly said sincerely as he bowed his head slightly. The girl smiled brightly as she waved it off and inclined her head slightly as well. He did see her blush visibly when she observed him closely. He wondered if he was blushing as well since he had to admit he really liked her smile and her expressive brown eyes. No harm done. I wasn't careful either, so I'm sorry too. Have a nice day, she said brightly as she slipped past him into the store. Naruto grinned and shrugged as he walked down the street. Meanwhile inside the store, Keita smirked as he watched his only daughter walk in with a slight blush on her cheeks. He had seen everything that just happened through the window. So even his tomboy of a daughter could find a male attractive if she wanted to. It must have been hot outside if your cheeks are red like that, Ten-chan. He observed with an innocent smile. Tenten snapped to him with wide eyes as she slapped both hands to her cheeks. Yeah, it was hot outside, Dad. Anyway, I'm done with training so I'm going to shower. She mumbled evasively as she quickly disappeared through the door to the house attached to the shop, leaving behind a snickering large man. A few weeks before Naruto's final term at the academy. Clang. A clash of metals sounded throughout the clearing of the training ground 42 as Naruto brought one of his sabers up to defend against a vicious kunai strike from Kakashi. If he didn't know any better, he'd have thought his sensei was seriously trying to kill him. Clang. A quick follow-up swipe from Kakashi was barely deflected as Naruto brought his second saber up for defense. Even though he had the advantage of 2 blades and a powerful kenjutsu style against Kakashi's single kunai, it felt like he was easily being toyed around with. This powerful man certainly wasn't an elite Junin for nothing. His exposed red Sharingan locked with Naruto's ice blue one and the blonde felt a rush as he sensed multiple paths that Kakashi could use to flow into from his last attack. As the silvered-haired Junin began his next course of action, Naruto's Sharingan then immediately narrowed down the paths until only one remained. It was going to be a stab at his neck from the side. He tried to react in time to counter Kakashi's attack but he could only manage to deflect the attack once again instead. This went on for several more minutes as clanging sounds filled the air. Finally, Naruto dropped his sabers and collapsed to all fours with heavy pants. Kakashi-sensei, I can't go on. Kakashi chuckled with an eye smile as he pulled his Hitai-8 down, put his kunai away, and took out an orange book to begin reading through it once again. Throughout all of this, he wasn't even looking a little winded from the vicious assault he had mercilessly imparted on the blonde teen. You still haven't been able to react faster to my attack patterns, it seems. I'm sorry to say I'm still holding back. If you had faced off against someone as strong as me who has no qualms about killing you, the best thing you can do with that Sharingan is to use it to run away. Kakashi said bluntly as he flipped over a page in the book. You keep telling me to react and choose just when my Sharingan shows me the multiple paths you could have taken instead of waiting until it predicted your true path. How the hell do I know which you would actually take? It just feels like my body wouldn't budge at all until the Sharingan finally showed me your true path and then I could finally move. I just can't seem to react any sooner. Naruto muttered with a frustrated frown as he calmed his heavy breathing. Kakashi nodded his understanding. I've had the same problem myself when I first got the Sharingan. It took me a long time to get used to it. Unfortunately, like I've told you in the beginning, using the Sharingan properly is mostly based on instincts. When your Sharingan presents you with multiple attack paths your enemy could take, you'll just have to instinctively trust your choice and react accordingly at that moment instead of waiting too long for your eye to determine the true path. As you are right now, you'd certainly react fast enough against many weak opponents. However, against someone that's just a bit higher level than you or more, you'll only just be able to defend yourself at best or unable to react at worst. You'll just have to keep at this until you can break through that barrier your subconscious has set upon your body. Kakashi explained as he continued to read the book. Naruto nodded his understanding as he put his eye patch back on. I guess that's it for today. He remarked sadly as he looked up at the sky to determine the position of the sun for time, which was around 5 in the afternoon. Don't worry, you're catching on quick with this, Naruto. Don't let this get you down. Kakashi assured. It's too bad you can't also teach me some genjutsu as well. Not even my Sharingan could copy any of your illusions because my capacity is too high to use anything properly, even though I clearly memorized how the chakra was molded. My chakra control just is never going to be that great, Kakashi-sensei. It wouldn't have mattered in the long run since it's definitely not your style to use genjutsu anyway. The most important thing from this aspect is that your Sharingan can instantly detect and break many illusions even better than mine. There won't be any more of those several seconds delays while Kurama-san has to tell you and then help break you out of any genjutsu placed on you. That Sharingan effectively cut out the middleman, and the few seconds saved will make a huge difference in a life or death battle. Ah, I feel unwanted, Naruto. I might just be a little jealous of an eyeball. Kurama cut in with mock hurt in her voice. Wouldn't that give you one more reason to take it easy instead of having to focus on saving my ass? Naruto retorted inwardly. You make it sound like I want to be lazy. The last time I came into the mindscape, you slept through my entire training time. He thought with deadpan. Kurama had the decency to strike a sheepish pose. That particular patch of grass was so comfortable and the sun was shining just right that I couldn't help myself. She defended herself rather lamely. I'll see you next weekend for some more work on this. I expect you to try to break the barrier soon in your ongoing training with your tenant. Until then, Yane. Kakashi's voice cut into Naruto's inner conversation as he waved goodbye before disappearing in a leaf shunshin. Well, you heard the scarecrow. Sorry, but I'll just have to kick your ass all over your mindscape once again soon. Kurama tried to say neutrally but Naruto could easily detect the excited glee in her tone. At least I think I figured out how to beat you. Just lure you over to that particular patch of grass and watch you succumb to your overwhelming laziness. He thought back with a grin. He chuckled aloud as he literally felt Kurama flipping him the bird. First day back at the academy, Uchiha Sasuke wasn't interested in many things aside from taking revenge on a certain man and restoring his clan to its former glory. However, he found himself rather curious about Uzumaki Naruto as he observed the blonde step into the classroom, surrounded by his friends. He would never admit the sudden interest to anyone though. The big difference between now and the last time he saw Naruto was, of course, the eye patch the blonde was now wearing over his left eye. As Sasuke observed the entire classroom erupt into conversations over how Naruto had gotten that injury, he had to admit, at least only to himself, that he was feeling a little forgotten. Oi, Dobi. How did you lose that eye? Fall on a kunai while practicing over this summer. Sasuke spoke up with a smirk, curious as to how Naruto would react to his provocation. It was his friends who reacted instead by glaring coldly at him while a growling Kiba had to be physically held back by Shikamaru and Shino. Naruto turned his head, his one eye focusing on Sasuke as if he noticed the Uchiha for the first time since entering the room. His expression was blank as he stared at Sasuke for a long moment, making the raven-haired boy shift uncomfortably under his gaze. His lips then twitched upward into a half-smile. Sure. I fell on a kunai. Let's go with that, he said lightly, before reaching an arm around a surprised Hinata and pulled her in next to him. Thankfully, my new girlfriend nursed me back to health with her kisses. He finished as he planted a quick kiss on her cheek, causing her to blush and squeak out an eep. The room was silent for a few seconds as everyone watched and absorbed this sudden development, before someone in the back decided to make the room's opinion known. It's about goddamn time. This made the entire room, minus Sasuke, break into loud cheering and clapping. As Sasuke watched classmates move in to congratulate the new couple, he frowned. He knew Naruto was lying about the falling on a kunai bit, but he wasn't going to call the blonde out on that for now. However, seeing as his plan to rile up Naruto had failed, he moved back to his original plan for the day, brood in his seat and stare out the window like usual. Omake. Dragon's bad day Anbu headquarters some time ago. Fuck this goddamn body. I can't stand brats, so why is it that my body has to be punished monthly for something I do not even want one bit in the first place? A dragon-masked Anbu snarled inwardly as she pushed herself to complete more paperwork in her office. She winced as another wave of painful cramps and aches racked her body once again. It was almost enough to destabilize her special genjutsu that hid her more feminine features. She could have allowed people to know her true gender at least, despite her insistence on her secrecy, but she understood that misdirection was the best option for someone in a powerful position like her. As the top Anbu in the Hokage's employ, she essentially knew all of Konoha's dark secrets and many jutsu. Forget being just one gold mine of information, she would be as valuable as 10 gold mines for any other village if they managed to get their hands on her. What better way to fool the enemies by having even her own comrades think she was male? However, at this moment, she truly wished she was a real male so she could skip all of this torture. She had already taken her frustration out on several of her male subordinates today as she secretly envied their good fortunes. As another wave of pain made its way through her, she slammed her pen on the desk with an audible snarl and sighed in frustration as she tried to burn 2 holes in the desk with her glare. That was why she was befuddled for a brief moment when a large marshmallow fell onto the desk in front of her with a soft whump. Her eyes widened in realization as this meant only one thing. Ooze, you, ma, ki, she slowly growled each syllable out in a distorted voice as she slowly moved her head up to lock her gaze with a wide-eyed Naruto caught red-handed as he hung upside down from the ceiling with chakra in his feet and more marshmallows in his hands. He apparently was trying to stick some marshmallows onto her dragon mosque's long horns. Since she was so distracted, he would have succeeded easily if he hadn't dropped that marshmallow. He tried to raise his hands in surrender, only for the marshmallows he was holding to fall onto the desk and dragon. Several of them bounced off her mask, making her entire body tremble with barely restrained fury. Naruto tried to begin as he continued to hang from the ceiling. Dragon snapped and decided she wasn't going to hear any more of this as she quickly reached for the ninjutsu strapped to her back. It took Naruto all he had to flatten himself against the ceiling to avoid her vicious slash. The terrified blonde then hopped off the ceiling onto the floor and ran straight out of the office with his best possible speed. Dragon was right behind him, breathing down his neck as she prepared to repeatedly swing wildly at him with her sword. She had clearly gone insane with anger. The Anbu that happened to be around did their best to get out of the way of their enraged commander chasing down their terrified nemesis while they were cutting and crashing their way throughout the headquarters. They also had to admire the blonde's resiliency since he managed to last this long against the powerful dragon's assault. Finally, after 10 long minutes of pursuit, Dragon trapped Naruto in a dead-end room and he had nowhere to go but through an enraged Anbu. How nice of you to pick this room. It's soundproofed so no one can hear you scream for mercy while I slice you into pieces, she growled out insanely as she closed the door behind her and brandished her sword threateningly. It was just a prank that didn't even work. How the hell did this get so out of hand? Naruto shouted frantically as he quickly climbed with chakra up to the far upper corner of the room with his back to the walls, keeping his trembling eyes on the enraged Anbu. You just picked the worst possible day to try something with me, she hissed as she stepped closer to the blonde. She had to admit making the blonde squirm like this was doing wonders for her mood, but she would still cut him up a little to teach him a lesson. Just as the crazed Anbu dashed forward and prepared to stab something blonde with a pointy thing, she happened to be reminded of some whisperings between her subordinates a few years ago. It was about how a cat-masked Anbu had her menstrual cycle accidentally announced to everyone within earshot because of this teen in front of her. As she noted Naruto wrinkle his nose in confusion for a moment, she remembered, with growing dread, that this blonde had an amazing sense of smell, and she realized that was how he sniffed out Yugao's period at that time. Her horror was complete when Naruto's confused expression changed to one of wide-eyed shock as he blurted out. You're a woman. That stopped dragon cold in her path as her sword halted mid-stab, inches from the cringing blonde. She was now frozen solid with shock and denial. As Naruto gulped at what he just said, he understood fully what was going to happen if he stupidly remained here while the Anbu was apparently rebooting her brain functions. Taking advantage of her temporary immobility, he hopped off the walls and slipped past her easily before opening the door to disappear out into the hallways. He made a beeline for an exit, not wanting to be anywhere near here when Dragon came back to her senses. A few minutes later, a suffering woman fell to her knees in the middle of a demolished room and yelled out her frustration at this bad day getting worse as another wave of cramps and aches hit her full force. So how do you like the latest chapter? Let me know in reviews. They'll keep me well fed. So I hope most of you will like my decision to compromise on the Sharingan. It'll help Naruto, but I also weakened it enough by making the Mangekyo Sharingan accessible only in certain situations, and his genjutsu will be still non-existent except for breaking illusions. If you're curious about what Naruto's eye patch could remind you of, just take a look at an image of Solid Snake in Metal Gear Solid 4 with his solid eye and you'll see the general shape. Remove the chunky computer bits and that's close enough to what Naruto's wearing. I hope I described it enough for most listeners on first try, but this is here to help give you a good idea. Thanks for listening. I hope you guys liked it. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like for more what ifs and support the author. See you guys in the next video.